So there we go. The recording is in progress. And as we were talking earlier, I'm using Mark Cassin's Zoom account. And so when this is all done, I understand the way this works is he'll get an email from Zoom with a link to the recording, which I then will send out to you all as well as to the fellows who were not able to join us today. And I don't know that we really need a vice chair for this meeting. So we'll just press on and proceed. So I'm supposed to give a report of the National Coordinators Report, and I'll do that in a minute, which will just be kind of the statistics, the numbers of the ministry in 2021. But before we do that, I just want us to go ahead and introduce ourselves to one another. Several of us have introduced ourselves to one another before in previous calls, but Mark Cassin has not been on many of our calls, and this is Corey's very first time. So, and I want them to have an opportunity to meet everyone else who is on here. So we'll go around and kind of introduce yourself. Just take 2 or 3, 4 minutes to tell us a little bit about where you're working, what your area of responsibility is, what your interest is in the prison ministry, and then we'll go on from there. So on my screen, Mark, you are in the upper left-hand corner. So why don't you go first? And I know that you have to leave in a few minutes also. So why don't you go first?
Okay, Barry, thank you. My name is Mark Cassin. I serve as the executive director of Metanoia Prison Ministries. Also, I wear a dual hat as the director of prison ministry for Mission in North America of the PCA. I am a former prisoner. I was incarcerated from 1988 until 2004. And during that time, I did every Bible study I could get my hands on. I was a Reformed Presbyterian kind of guy. And I did stuff with Ligonier. I did things through Pensacola Chapel Library. I even was able to take 3 classes with RTS, Reformed Theological Seminary out of Charlotte, in their distance learning program. But that was something that someone gave a scholarship for. It was paid for. And so since my involvement in prison ministry, I've been involved since 2006, released in 2004, been involved in 2006, been doing it full time since 2010. I was searching for the next level of education for prisoners. Oddly enough, Greg Hounstein and I connected back in, 2014, 2013, and I couldn't make the connection between Metanoia and Mintz. It wasn't until Barry reached out that we had been seriously praying for some sort of seminary level work, and ever since then we've had this partnership that I think is working well. And I love Mintz. I helped start a study center here where I live in Tennessee, and now Barry's here and he's taken that over. But I love Mintz. I love prison ministry. That's what God has raised me up to do for most of my adult life now. So I did it on the inside. I'm doing it on the outside too, by the grace of God. So
thanks, Mark. And
last thing, I am ordained as a ruling elder in the PCA.
Thanks. And Mark does teach for us. He teaches for our study center at Walker State Prison. He's teaching now this term a class on Acts for us. And one of the things that has been one of the real positives of this past year is that we have taken our partnership between the seminary and prison and Metanoia M&A to another level. And a little bit later, if Mark's still able to participate, I'd like Mark to talk some more about that from the M&A Metanoia side of things. We'll come back to that. So Corey, you're our guest here today, and we're really glad that you're here. Just real quickly, introduce yourself to the fellows.
Yeah, thank you, Barry. My name's Corey Miller. This is completely new for me. I first got exposed to Mintz through Dr. Julian Zug. He would come preach for us, Pulpit Supply in Lake Charles, Louisiana. So I've always admired the Mintz ministry, what the ministry does. I see the value in it. I'm a person, I love reading and learning the deeper things about God, and seeing seeing the outworking of that in my life, the lives of my children, our relationships. I know it is the relationship with God through knowledge of God and knowing Him through Christ that, that's where the rest is. That's what everyone's seeking. So I would say I have a passion for those things. This phone call is the first step I'm taking towards this whole adventure. So it's completely new to me, but kind of the background plan is I'll be talking with Barry this week, and then go and do some visits with some prisons with you guys, and starting curriculum through MENTS, and talking with my session at my home church. I will start teaching Sunday school on the material, kind of like before I would start implementing it in the prisons. It's kind of the plan we kind of have together right now. So I'm married. My wife is Ann. She's my best friend. Great wife, great mother. She supports me in all I do. We have 4 kids. One's grown, 22 to 10 years old. I'm a regional manager for my work. I'm actually on a job site right now. I had to come out to a job site. I can't stay on the call the entire duration, but that's another element in this is my availability, my time. But I've been with the company for about 15 years, and I'm in a position now where I can start scaling back some of my responsibilities and freeing up more time. So I don't know exactly how it's going to look, but it looks like it's coming together pretty good already. So, and I really admire how quick everyone moves. I love that. I'm used to Presbyterian things taking a long time. I'm on a pastor search committee for our pastor, and I just really admire how quick things are moving here. I like that. That is right up my alley. I'm considered pretty productive, I guess. I like to be moving, and accountability. I can kind of see that personally for me. I think one of the things that I'm going to enjoy with or benefit spiritually from this is the accountability from brothers like you guys that are, taking the gospel and out, and just that eager push for it. So thank you. Good to meet everyone.
Thank you, Corey. Charles, CJ, why don't you go next?
I'm CJ. I'm a chaplain for the Florida DOC at Zephyr Hills. I started there in 2007 as a corrections officer, and in 2015 I became a chaplain, or the assistant chaplain at Zephyr Hills. I've been there since. I first came into contact with Neil, Dr. Hegeman at ZCI, and seen the work that Mitch is doing there. And it's had a lot of fruit there. When the first, I believe it was the first MDiv in DOC was produced from an inmate there who since has gone on to be an interim pastor after he got out. There's been another guy that got out there that got a degree through Mintz. He's a bivocational pastor now, not too far actually from me. I live in Tampa, by the way. I'm married. I got 4 kids. I go to a PCA church in Tampa. And but yeah, Mitch has been great. I've seen it. I see it preparing guys. There's one guy in particular I feel he'll be out in a couple of years. He's got a pastoral call on him. Definitely, I would see him laboring as a pastor when he gets out of there in some capacity. So it's built guys up as leaders that I've seen, but it's also been a really good evangelistic tool inside, as it just draws guys that are sort of on the fence, or guys that wouldn't even say they're Christians. They have a desire to just have, I can get a degree, I can get some kind of, official looking certificate. That sounds cool. I'll go do that. And so it really has been a great thing at Zephyr Hills. I've taught a handful of classes over the last couple of years. I've written a few, and it's been really good. I've enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to. I'm really enjoying being able to teach the material, and I've enjoyed writing it too. But that's really my heartbeat in the program is the teaching and the writing.
Great, thanks, CJ. Who is it at Zephyr Hills that's getting out soon that you see having a pastoral call in his life?
So Ron Edmondson, he has about 3 years to go.
I was wondering if that was Ron.
Yeah. He has an MDiv as well. He was the second, I guess. I don't know if it was the second in the state of Florida, but the second at Zephyr Hills to get an MDiv. He wrote a course on Ephesians. He's finished one on First Timothy, and now he's working on one on Second Timothy. The guy's just a very, very strong doctrinally. He's a great speaker. He's got a pastor's heart. I mean, I really see him laboring somewhere in that capacity when he gets out.
And
That's awesome.
do you see him wanting to come into the PCA?
Maybe. I'd say he describes himself as kind of a Reformed Baptist. So I don't know that he would go the PCA route. I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. I hadn't spoke to him about it.
Well, I don't want to take more time now, but maybe we can talk later. Maybe your church could get more directly involved with him. You know, we have up here at Walker, we have a number of our students who have become members of local churches, you know, while they're incarcerated, and then move in that direction when they get out. So we can talk about that. We talk about that offline.
Yes, sir.
Thanks, CJ. Hey, Jason, introduce yourself to the guys.
Hey guys, I'm Jason Dalton. I'm a teaching elder in the PCA, and I was a pastor for about 7 years, and the Lord providentially closed that door, and I didn't know what the Lord had in store. So there was a little bit of desert wandering, trying to figure out what my next call would be. And providentially, Barry Smith and we have a mutual friend, and said, you know what? I have a passion to train pastors and prepare them for ministry. And he said, you should really talk to Barry. And the Lord used that relationship to open up the doors for Mints, and through that also Metanoia. So I'm wearing two hats, going to be involved with Mints and Metanoia, and just really excited about the opportunity. I'm in Orlando, Florida, so I'm going to be in charge of the Central Florida for all of Mints, and so basically a 2-hour radius around Orlando. I've taught a few classes already in 2 different prisons, and trying to figure out how to get into other ones around me, and also raise up volunteers, be able to teach as well, and on the Metanoia side, raise up volunteers to disciple one-on-one and do correspondence. So I'm really excited about what the Lord has in store for Central Florida.
Thanks, Jason. And then Chris.
Hi, first, Barry, it looks like we're in the same room. My name is Chris Capola. I'm a teaching elder in the PCA. I've been in church ministry about 25 years here in Miami. And my last endeavor was I was in a church plant in Homestead, Florida for about 15 years. I, like Jason, had a little wilderness experience when COVID hit, sensed, I needed to go in a new direction. I'm currently teaching elder out of call and looking to be called to a church that I've been attending. It's actually been our home church our family grew up in. And a couple of years before COVID, had the opportunity to teach a class, a men's class at Dade Correctional Prison, and just fell in love with it. Fell in love with the men there, the brothers, their hunger for the word. I don't know, it's just so rewarding. And like we always learn is, when we teach, we get more out of it than the students. And so it's just, I many times I prayed that, Lord, if I could, I would love to do this full time if the opportunity came. And I guess the opportunity was always there, but it was a matter of me launching out in faith and doing it. And so I'm now launching out in faith, raising support so that I could do this full time. I also have a background in theater. I developed a drama ministry and wanted to pull that into the prison ministry as well. And I memorized the book of Mark. And so just, last month, just a month ago, less than a month ago, I had the opportunity to meet Barry up there at Walker State Prison and perform the gospel mark to the inmates at Walker. And it was just again, a tremendous experience. My favorite audience now is with the brothers in prison for like the same reasons, teaching. And I'm hoping to use the drama ministry as an evangelism tool to the inmates, to introduce them to Jesus, and also then to initiate, Mint's courses. And while I was up there with Barry, I was hanging out in the Metanoia office, and I was actually reading a wonderful book. What was it again? Gentle and Lowly.
Gentle and Lowly,
awesome
yeah.
book. And was reading that at Mark Cassin's desk. And I was hoping to meet Mark, but he had COVID. So Mark, we finally meet face to face via Zoom. But well, actually, I met you a couple of years ago when you came to speak down in Miami for Barry. But I'm also very interested in Metanoia and what they're doing, would like to be a part of that. And so when I go to a prison, present the gospel mark, would love to initiate a Mint's class there, invite them to do that, and also Metanoia courses. So just excited to be with you guys in partnership on this.
Two things, Chris. Remind me offline. One of the men at Walker who saw what you did has been talking to his father, and his father's gone on the website and seen, and he wants to see about getting you come to do Mark at his church, at the
Wonderful.
Father's church.
Awesome.
So remind me to get that information to you. And I think we talked about this, but it'd be great for you to write a course on the Gospel of Mark.
Yes.
That then people could do a Mint's course on Mark after seeing your show on the Gospel of Mark, and tie those two together.
Yes, we did talk about that. That's something I would love to do, is have I see that as like two courses, 1 through 8 and 9 through 16.
So look forward to doing that. Nathan, welcome. Glad you could be here. Introduce yourself to the guys.
Hi, guys. Yes, I'm glad I could be here too. I had some technical difficulties to begin with, but we made it. My name is Nathan Buckman, and I live here in Lakeland, Florida. I am a Mint's seminary student, and my goal is to finish an MDiv with Mint's. My wife and I been married almost 26 years. We have 6 children, 3 of whom are adult kids out of the house, and we have a 17-year-old, 16, and 12-year-old still at home in school here with us in Florida. And 2 of our kids are in college, and the other, our other son is married and actually lives here in Florida as well, and has a job. And as of January, the first week of January this year, my wife and I committed to being full-time missionaries under the supervision of Mint's. And so we are in the process of raising funds for our missions work. And I have had the pleasure of teaching Mint's courses at Sumter Correctional Institution starting in May of last year. And it really was prompting by Neil saying, hey, part of your master's program is you're going to need to have some hours for the practicum. So a good opportunity for you to do your practicum would just be to teach in prison. What do you think? And I'm like, my response was, well, not too excited about it, but let's rip it off like a Band-Aid and let's get it done. And so, went my first class session, and from the very first moment I stepped in and just saw these guys who are hungry to have a deeper knowledge of who God is and the truth that the scripture holds. It was really profound. And I taught 2 classes last year, and I just started today a new class on hermeneutics. And the Lord opened a new prison for us, for seminary and prison, and that is Sumter Correctional Work Camp, which is adjacent to the main campus. This is a smaller prison, around about 200 inmates. And so very different than the main camp. None of the the amenities that the main camp offers. It's kind of ironic to say that with regards to prison. It's not the Holiday Inn, but no chapel, no chaplain. The room that we met in today was just very bare bones room that maybe would be typically set up for visitors to visit inmates, kind of a place. And but anyway, I had a great class. I had 3 guys show up. Nobody knew that I was coming. Nobody knew that I was going to be there, and nobody knew none of the prisoners were on the roster for callouts who had signed up for the class, which I've come to find out is very typical in seminary and prison ministry, that, you know, the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing. So, but it was great because one of the guys came in and said, "Hey, the sergeant told me I was supposed to come to seminary, and here you are, and let me go get some of my buddies." And so they threw together a class, and then after our class today said, "We're gonna get the word around, and we're gonna tell all the guys that we know are interested, and we'll have them here next Tuesday or next Wednesday." And I said, "Great." And I said, "And that's how Mints works. We work from the inside out. We can't rely on the outside in approach so much." So that's me.
Thanks, Dave. That's pretty cool. The sergeant told him, "You're supposed to be in seminary, go to seminary."
Yeah.
We need more sergeants like that.
Yeah, and he said, the sergeant knows I'm a Christian, but I didn't even know that you existed. I don't even know what Mints is. But the sergeant just said, "Hey, you know, get in there." And so anyway.
Great. Thanks, Nathan. And Neil? You're muted, Neil.
I'm one of the developers, married to Sandy. We live in Anniston, Alabama. I have 3 children and 2 grandchildren. So Jonathan we moved to Alabama to live close to him and his wife and children. And I have 2 daughters in Colorado Springs. And on February 12th, Melinda is marrying her sweetheart. So we're really excited about that. Co-founder of Mints 21 years ago, and also helped the Men's Seminary and Prison get started 11 years ago. Zephyr Hills was our first prison, although there had been some contacts around Miami prior to that, but not classes. So Zephyr Hills, our first experience was a good experience, and that really helped. And Charles was definitely part of the good experience. He and Chaplain Clanton were just super motivational and instructive, because prison is new for us, most of us, and the rules and regulations, you have to learn them. And so anyway, many years later, still with the ministry. For Mints, I serve on the academic executive committee, and I'm a consultant because of my age. That's the title I've grown into, consultant. So I've handed over most of my responsibilities, including national coordinator. Last year, I handed that over to Barry Smith. So looking forward to working with you folks, and my role in this meeting too. If you have any questions about the Mints manual, Mints catalog, or the Mints or the seminary, Mints Seminary and Prison manual, I do know the background why some of the decisions were made, and it might be helpful to give you an update if you have any questions about that.
Great. Thank you, Neil. Yeah, Neil is essential in all that we have done. He mentioned co-founder. He and Greg Howenstein in 1999, 2000 started Mints, just the 2 of them out of a church in Miami. And it has grown to where it is all over the world. Yesterday, we had reports from coordinators and deans and all over the world. It was just really thrilling to listen to those reports and to see how Mints has spread and its reach into some of the most difficult places in the world. And Neil was at the beginning, at the founding of the seminary ministry, the prison ministry, the seminary and prison ministry, and really has been the driving force behind this for many years. So just real quickly, most of you know my story, but I wanted to share just a little bit. that I had been a PCA pastor, and 15, 16 years ago now, during a period of deep depression and discouragement, I started drinking and became an alcoholic, spiraled downward very quickly, and ended up being deposed from the ministry and was divorced by my wife, and I lived in a homeless shelter for 2 years. The Lord met me in that homeless shelter, began putting me back together. I moved to Miami in 2010, reconnected with a woman that I had known there who was since divorced. And Gail and I were married in September of 2010. And she really stuck by me as I was still working on sobriety. My sobriety was not solid. And it really was not until 2014 that God delivered me from alcohol. And I have been sober now for about 7.5 years. But with sobriety came a desire to return to doing ministry. And there really were not a lot of places that I could go. I wanted to stay in the PCA. There are not a lot of PCA churches that have in their job description for employees, deposed former alcoholic pastor. And so where could I do ministry? And the fellows from Mintz gave me an opportunity to do ministry. And so in January of 2016, I started teaching classes for Mintz in Miami, in a church in Miami. And it was in May of 2016, Neil asked me if I would teach a class in a prison. At first I said no, I had no interest in going into prison. But Neil is nothing if not persistent. And after asking me several times, I agreed to teach one class, and very quickly was hooked on being able to work with these men who were some of the most passionate students that I'd ever come in contact with. And so I've been doing the seminary in prison with Mintz since May of 2016. So that's just a short version of my story.
Well, Barry, I just want to say, Barry, you may not be qualified for PCA teaching elder, but you're highly qualified here in your background for gospel ministry.
Well, thank you, Chris. Certainly qualified to be in prison.
Yeah.
I probably ought to be inside wearing blues instead of coming in and ministering. So thank you. Let's go ahead and Mark, let's talk a little bit more about the partnership between Mintz and M&A and Metanoia. So again, let me just kind of set the stage for how we got started. So I'm teaching classes in Dade Correctional Institution for Mintz. And one of my students came up to me. Let me see if I've got one. Came up to me one day and asked me if I'd ever heard of Metanoia Ministries. And I said, no, I had not. Now, I've been in the PCA since before there was a PCA. I was in the RPCES, which became part of the PCA. So I've been in the PCA for a long time, had not heard of Metanoia Ministries. And he shows me a booklet like this, because he's doing Bible studies with Metanoia Ministries. And on the front of the booklet he showed me was an M&A logo. Well, I knew what M&A was, Mission to North America, the committee of the PCA that oversees ministries in the United States and Canada. So I went back to my office, got on my computer, got on the denomination website, and found that, lo and behold, the PCA has a prison ministry that I didn't know anything about. I'd never heard of it. So I sent an email to Mark, said, hey, Mark, you're a PCA doing prison ministry. Hello, Bill. We are a seminary in prison program that is mostly PCA people. Maybe we should talk. And so Mark responded, came down to Miami, we met, and through that connection, we partnered with starting a seminary up here in North Georgia at Walker State Prison, where Metanoia has kind of their flagship mentoring ministry. So we've been doing that for several years. Within the last year or so, Neil suggested that we might have a more formal partnership with M&A, where our Mintz missionaries might become part of M&A Metanoia, and then be able to use M&A for our financial management as well as being able to go into PCA churches for fundraising as officially part of M&A Metanoia. So we explored some of that this year, and we have reached an agreement with M&A and Metanoia and Mints to have this kind of formal partnership. So Mark, could you explain a little bit more from the M&A Metanoia side how this works?
Sure. Thanks, Barry. Keep in mind, I've got to run in about 7 minutes. I will be on my phone, but I'm going to switch from my laptop to my phone. I've got to pick up my oldest daughter. But yeah, so Metanoia does 3 things. We have a correspondence-based ministry where students study our courses. They get the booklet that Barry held up, and they get that in the mail. They fill out all the answers to it, to the study, then they mail it back to the headquarters, which is in Tarpon Springs, Florida. And in Shelley, with the other Metanoia people, we raise volunteers who one-on-one work with these prisoners. So we currently have about 700 volunteers in over 250 churches around the country who are working with about 1,000 prisoners in the correspondence ministry. It costs the prisoners 1 stamp to send that through the mail, so that's their buy-in, but we pay for everything else. We supply all the answer keys and everything. The second thing we do is we set up mentoring sites, locations where we have mentors. We raise mentors to go in and spend an hour. We train them, and then they spend about an hour and a half twice a month with a prisoner sitting across the table from them doing life-on-life mentoring ministry. And that's the state of Georgia has said that that's the most vital component of their faith and character model, the one-on-one mentoring. In fact, when they reopened for COVID, we were the only group they let go into any of the prisons. We were the first group to go back in because it's so important, this life-on-life aspect. And Charles, as a chaplain, you probably get that. You probably have a lot of one-on-one interaction with prisoners because they need that affirmation. A lot of them come from homes where they didn't know their father, or they come from single parent homes. And so having this life-on-life relationship has been huge. And we have sites in Tennessee, Georgia, and in South Carolina. And it goes really well. What I'd like to see happen is I would like to see it start at prisons where there's a Mint seminary. I'd like to see all the seminary students have a mentor that could come in and visit them twice a month and live life with them and encourage them in their studies and such. Because you do get that when you go to regular seminary out here, when you go to RTS or you go to somewhere else, Mid-America Reformed Seminary, wherever you go, there's someone who is with you walking along, that's an academic advisor or a pastor or someone else who's there for encouraging part of your life. And so I think it's a natural fit from that. The third thing we do is, and Barry hinted at this, I think, with this guy that's getting ready to go home in 3 years, is we connect students and mentees with churches in the area they're going to go before they get out, and we help make that connection. And so, for example, Jeremy Prather, who was at Walker, who was a mentee as well as a Mintz graduate, he had been writing to the same church for 3.5, 4 years before he got out. People from the church had visited him. They came and supported him and taught his class along with him that he was teaching on Sundays. And so when he walked out the very first Sunday, I actually went down and went to church with him, and half the people in there knew him. They were waiting for him. He wasn't a stranger, right? Like, I don't know about y'all, but it's hard. It's hard when you move from one town to another to go to a new church where you don't know anybody.
Yeah.
It's a whole lot harder when you just got out of the joint and you're walking in and you don't know anybody. And that question, well, where'd you come from? Right? Well, I came from Walker State Prison. So to already have people that know you and welcome you, I mean, he became a member within 2 weeks. I think it took him 2 or 3 weeks for them to receive him as a member because they already knew him for several years. And so those are the 3 things we do. Well, the next logical step, we also have a partnership with Ligonier Ministries. So 18 of the courses that Ligonier offers in their academy, 6 Bible, 6 theology, and 6 apologetic courses, they have given to us, and we have formatted those to our booklet format. So the students that go through our 5 courses, which take about 2.5 to 3 years if they do 1 booklet a month, they can then go into Ligonier courses to get a more advanced study. But the next logical thing is there's no certificate that comes with that. There's no degree, no diploma, anything like that. And so our type of discipleship in Mints seem to be pretty decent. It's a good way in my mind. Like there's probably guys at every prison where we have a Mint site who aren't ready for seminary level work yet. And so doing metanoia stuff would be good for them.
Yeah, yeah.
And then they will move up and get to a point where they're writing essays and doing things, and they're ready to then go into a seminary program. And so I just see it as being a good way for both Mints and Metanoia to work together. If you're working in a prison, why not hang up a little sheet that says, hey, here's some Bible studies you can do. And by the way, you can earn a Reformation Study Bible for free. And you'll have a person in your life who's going to encourage you and love you even after you finish the courses. Like you'd be amazed at how many of the people stick with the person they've been corresponding with for years. And then when they're done, they still write to them, they still encourage them. So there's this opportunity to raise. To me, the biggest thing is when I stepped out of prison, I was blown away at how little the church cared, the Reformed community. We have the doctrine in its purest form, and yet who's doing national prison ministry? We're the first evangelical church in the United States to have a national prison ministry. Right? Well, I say shame on us. That should have happened 30 years ago or 40 years ago. The Reformed community, Charles knows how many chaplains in the state of Florida are Presbyterian or Reformed, right? Not very many. And so it's a shame to me in a sense that the church, and so I see part of my job is I visit churches every month practically, and I'm trying to get people involved in prison ministry. My goal, at least on the PCA side, is to have one member in every single church in America doing prison ministry, even if it's from the comfort of their own home. But anyway, I love the partnership. I hope to see it grow. It seems natural to me to set up study centers, set up mentoring sites, make the courses available, and then in a geographical area, go ahead and recruit volunteers to serve in all three of those areas. Some people want to be professors, others don't. Some people want to be mentors, others don't. Some people just want to do the correspondence ministry, and that's great. At least they're engaged in prison ministry. And that's my goal. Jesus said to remember the prisoner as though, I was in prison, you visited me. That's one of the 5 areas of ministry he mentions by name. And I'm preaching to the choir, so I'm going to let it go. But if you can't tell, that's one of the things I'm passionate about. When I was inside, our chaplain at Corcoran, the first prison I was at, was for 4 years. He was a Sovereign Grace Baptist. And we had students from Westminster Escondido come up to us once a month and preach. We had Reformed people come in and preach to us. It was like the Garden of Eden as far as a Reformed place. We had a full library of every book in the Banner of Truth Trust, and every book in the PNR catalog was donated. I went to Soledad for the next 11 years. I couldn't get a single person to come into the prison from the Reformed community for 11 years. I tried OPC, I tried PCA, I tried everything within close distance, Reformed Baptist. They wouldn't come. And so that's it. I'll let it go.
Could I have a quick question, Mark? It's just, if I go to a prison as an evangelist presenting a gospel, Mark, afterwards, if I talk about metanoia and just doing the correspondence, can I actually have stuff to give them, or they sign up and go from there?
No, what you would do is you would talk to the chaplain ahead of time about how can I bring a flyer in. I print them off. They're just a single sheet, and it's a flyer on one side and it's the sign up sheet on the other that they can mail into the prisoner does that. But that's something you talk to security about. You don't ever want to take anything in you don't have permission to take in.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, no, you don't take them the first booklet. You just take them a sign-up sheet. And
Gotcha.
then Shelley in the home office sends them the first booklet.
Okay, great. Okay.
Thanks. And when Mark's able to get back on, we can have him talk about the new arrangement that we have for you all if you want to become employees of M&A, assigned to Mints, and have M&A handle all of your finances for you. We can talk about that later. Hey, Mark.
So what we have, I have a visitor here.
Right? Thank you, visitor. Yeah.
And he'll introduce himself.
So this is dear to my heart, but I'm not too involved. So I'm a lawyer and I'm a seminary grad from Covenant. So I visit people under the pretense that I'm their personal lawyer so that I can pray with them at any time I can show up at prison. So when you guys get a DUI, like last night we were having too much wine, I can visit you, encourage you, and pray for you. That's my informal prison ministry as a lawyer. But and I did that in St. Louis in urban. So I would visit different people, and one day I'm going to be in there, and you guys can come visit me because I'm a sinner and I know I'll mess up too. But I love this ministry because here's the initials. Ready? P-O-W-R. What's that spell?
You're missing an E.
I know we need an E. That might be evangelism. But I'm out of the context where Jesus said, Skip, help the orphans. That's the O. The P is the prisoner, which I neglect. And then the W is the widow in need, and R is the refugee, which I did in St. Louis for 9 years with Syrians who saw their mom blown up, all kinds of stuff like that. P is important. The church has to do power or the E doesn't work, right? Because we're a bunch of frauds. Seriously. God told you those 4 things and you don't do them. So are you sure you're following Jesus? That's my perspective. And so as I'm walking, failing in orphan care, and I realize how complex it is, I see when I'm faithful to God's categories, I see all kinds of other stuff happen. Not that I'm putting that in front of grace, saved by faith in Christ alone, but I realize as I walk out my salvation, I see the power show up when I go. So when I go to those prisons on those personal visits, I realize, Jesus, you're right here with me. I sense his presence more than any other place. So I'm excited you guys are doing it. You're way ahead of me down the road. I'm at the bottom of the mountain. So throw me a line. That's what I say, and pray for me.
And what's your name? Who are you?
Skip Ritchie.
Oh, Skip Ritchie. You prayed for me yesterday after I did my report.
Yeah, your name on the screen is Mark Cason. So I didn't know if that was Barry or not.
Yeah, I use Mark's Zoom account. But yes, I'm Barry. And where are you located, Skip?
Charlottesville. So the guys at my church there in Charlottesville go to the Charlottesville Regional Prison normally, but they haven't been there for 2 years because they're worried about COVID. And it's a short-term visit. They used to do weekly Bible studies. And I keep asking them, why aren't you guys getting in? I don't understand why they're getting blocked. But
Yeah,
that's the current
Virginia
status.
prisons are still shut down to visitors and outside ministries, are they not?
That's what these guys are telling me. The 4 guys that go in there regularly, they're like, because I said, I want to join you. They're like, we're still not going in.
Yeah, there are several states that have not reopened to outside programs and visitors because of COVID. North Carolina, South Carolina, we have Metanoia folks there who can't get in, have not been able to get in. And I had understood that Virginia prisons were also still shut down.
And it might be because of the governor, but thank goodness the governor changed. And I think maybe that'll open up if we ask, because Northup is definitely a Christian. We probably could talk to him. I just need help on what you say to get it opened up.
So can you get me your contact information or give that to Neil, who can get it to me?
Right.
And we'll be in touch.
Yeah, it'd be great.
Thanks, Skip.
Speaking about the prisons being closed to the chaplains that we're talking to here, I heard on the news that a bunch of federal prisons were shut down because of potential. You know about that, guys? Any update on that?
I read an article. There was a massive gang fight in Texas, and 2 people were killed. And I think they're shutting down the whole nation, worried about the response of gang activity in other prisons because of what happened in Texas. So I don't think it's COVID related, but it was a big deal from the bit that I read.
Yeah, I knew. So I didn't understand why the whole nation was shut down, but it's because of gang and they think there'll be a retaliatory. Yeah. Okay. Wow.
All right, great. Thank you. Is that Greg? Hi, Greg.
Hey, how you doing?
Why don't you, Greg, have a seat.
Yeah, all right. Say hi.
Say hi to the Men's Seminary and Prison.
Yes, this is that's the
Great to see
guru.
you.
So introduce yourself real quick, Greg, to these guys who don't know you.
Greg Howenstein, retiring, not really, changing from role of president to Julian, kind of shifting roles. I'm not leaving Mintz. I'm just going to do some different stuff. And I'm excited about prison ministry. I'm looking forward to getting started in it more myself. I actually had the privilege of starting our very first prisoner off in Zephyr Hills, and it grew from there. And now you guys have taken it much further, and man, you guys are doing great. So I'm excited to see what's going to come of it and how I can help.
So Greg was the other co-founder of Mints with Neil back in 1999, 2000, who started all of Mints there out of Old Cutler Presbyterian Church in Miami. So you have here the two grandfathers of Mints sitting side by side together. Yes. Well, thanks. Real quick, I just wanted to do kind of a statistics update of the last year. And I will email everybody a copy of this report. But we had ministry in a total of 27 facilities last year. And we had 154 students. Now that was down rather significantly over the last couple of years. Prior to COVID, we were running somewhere between 400 and 450 students. Last in 2020, that was down to 220, mostly because as every prison in the country shut down, we lost contact with many of our students. We had been, prior to COVID shutting down, we had been almost exclusively in-person programs, and we weren't able to get in prisons. We didn't have any connection with our prisoners. We didn't know where they were. And in 2020, we pivoted to primarily a correspondence model, and we're able to contact about 200, 220 of the 450 that we had had prior to that. And then as we went into 2021, we can continue to lose contact with a number of our students. So we ended the year with 154, but we are now in a rebuilding phase. So most of us here are in locations. Well, everybody here is Florida except for me and Corey and Skip. So Florida, I think, might have been the first state in the country that reopened to volunteers. At least it was the first one that I heard of. So we are back to having classes in our Florida prisons. Georgia opened in August, and as Mark mentioned, Metanoia, along with Mints, was the first outside programs that were invited back into Georgia prisons. So we do have in-person classes going in a number of locations, but we have continued with some of the correspondence students that we had started with. So I said we have 154 students now, and we granted 19 diplomas and degrees in 2021, which is also down from previous years, but I said we are rebuilding. And so I'm actually very, very optimistic about where we are going to be going in this next year. And I will send you a written copy of this, and you can see all of the facilities where we have students, which ones are in person, which ones are correspondence students, what courses that we taught over the past year, and we'll be able to see where we've come from and where we hope to go. So any questions or comments?
How many classes are there, Mints classes are there on DVD?
Neil, can you answer that?
Yeah, there's, well, actually Nathan would probably, do you know, Nathan, the number? But they are on our website, but not all of the DVDs have been put up on the website, which is the www.mints.edu. You have to surf around a little bit and you'll find it under, I think, courses.
Google Drive, you mean? Like it's listed on the Google Drive?
Yeah, it's just on the webpage.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So that's, I would say maybe 12. Nathan, does that sound right? Nathan is sitting in the studio. Nathan is sitting in the studio where the videos are made. And some of us, like Barry, myself, and Charles, we've had our courses were videotaped. We aim at about 8 hours if we can, like 1 hour per lesson, and then an academic lesson is 50 minutes actually. We aim for 8 hours so that the inmates are able to, on their own, be able to watch these DVDs.
8 hours per course, you mean? Each DVD is about,
Yeah, the DVD is 8, so they have to make up another 8
okay.
of in-class activities, like going through the questions and answers, doing book reports, reporting back to what they're writing on their essay and so forth. So you would, when the prisons were semi-closed or when it was hard to get a volunteer in, we would have a facilitator in the prison work on doing the courses. That was very slow, but we were able to get some courses done that way.
Great, thank you.
Nathan, do you know the number that have been produced on DVDs?
I wish I was more prepared for that question. I think saying 12 is kind of generous. So I was actually going to mints.edu to see, because we can't count all of them. But maybe, yeah, probably pretty close to between 10 and 12. I'm just looking at them right now.
Okay, good.
So, but we have, just so you know, and we can come, I don't know if you want to talk about it now or at a different time, but I've got about 7 in the kitty that need to be produced. So that's one of the things that I wanted to talk with us today about, is video production. So.
Okay, go ahead and do that.
Okay, so Neil, before I start talking, Neil, have you had an opportunity to talk to Julian about video production?
Yes, I did.
Okay, do you want to share before I talk? Do you have any updates?
Well, I asked him who puts the video up on the web page, and he said Nathan can do that.
Okay.
If you ask me a question, I'll always bring it back to you.
No, it's fine.
Yeah.
I don't want to share if you have an update. So the reason why, and I don't mean to sound cryptic, but the reason why I'm asking Neil to chime in first is my dad, Larry Buckman, this is his legacy, this video studio that you see behind us. This is his legacy, and he built this with other volunteers from other churches, and he has the equipment to everything that's needed for the most part, even the editing software for this computer, to produce the videos that you see online. He passed away last February 16th. And after he passed away, I had a meeting with a gentleman named George Waters, and he is a layperson in the church. He's not affiliated necessarily with any denomination. Really just a friend of my dad's. Been on some missions trips with my dad, kind of a thing. And he also is a video producer and networked with my dad and helped build this studio. And I had a meeting with him around about last April or May. And George said, you know, I love editing video. I love producing video. And I would like to be able to take that on as my role or my participation with Mints, to take the video that we record here in the studio, which I direct, I take care of that. But I'll take the raw video and I'll convert it into what we see on mints.edu, uploaded on our website. And I said, hey, that's great. I mean, I was still grieving the loss of my dad, and even that month, my father-in-law passed away. So it was a rough first, half of the year last year. And I said, great, go for it. He produced, in May, I believe, he produced Serving the Least of These, which was a class that I asked him to produce for me because I was going to teach that class. That was my first class to teach at Sumter. And so he produced it, and everything went fine. But since then, he hasn't been able to produce any more videos. He has been involved in some other volunteer capacities and hasn't been able to spend any focused amount of time on video production. And so I asked Neil last week when he was here visiting with me and just shared with him, I've been trying to connect with George Waters, and I left him some voicemails last fall and a couple of emails and no response. I didn't get a response until December when my mom went to visit his wife, and just kind of through the grapevine, he sent a message back with my mom saying, hey, just let Nathan know, I'm so sorry I haven't responded. I've had a lot of things going on. I'm busy here locally at church, and we've had some stuff happen, and I just haven't been able to do anything with Mint's videos, but I'll give him a call in January and we'll see what we can do. And now we're February 2nd, I haven't heard back. One of the reasons for me reaching out to him was to ask if I could, in order to kind of take on some of the load, if he could teach me how to produce the videos so that we have a standard produced video for Mint's. And I'm willing to do that, and I'm willing to learn how to do that. I have the equipment. I don't, let's do it. But anyway, so here we are now. I haven't heard from George, and before I pull the trigger again to reach out to him, I talked to Neil and wanted to kind of propose it to seminary and prison. And as a team, and now that I'm a missionary with Mint's and not a volunteer lay person, I would like to ask if I would be able to help out by stepping in that role and producing videos. Like I said, I think we have 7 that need to be produced, 2 of which have been recorded in the last 2 months that we could be using right now, in our ministry. I need to be brought up to speed in the technical aspect of producing it. I have the equipment. I just need to learn how to do it. And I'm a good student. It would take me probably a week of taking some online classes to be able to produce, the videos, is what I anticipate. The classes don't cost me anything. But I would like to be able to have, as the new guy on the block, I'd like to be able to have some guidance as to, what would you like to see? The way that my dad produced the videos, you see the green screen behind me, he would, during post-production, he would add an image on that green screen behind the professor that would be relevant to what they were teaching. If it was, ancient church history, there would be a Colosseum back there, you know what I mean? And then he would, whoever's teaching would teach. So I share all of that because here we are, and I'd like to, pitch it back to you guys. And my intention is never to step on toes. I never want George to feel like he got nudged out or none of that. But at the same time, I don't want to keep having a stack of dishes here that just need to be washed. I'm willing to learn how to wash them. So that's all I have.
Yep.
I'll give
Mark?
George a call this week. I'll give George a call this week to see where he's at.
Okay.
Thanks, Neil. Mark, I see that hand.
I'm sorry. So I had my phone hooked up in my car and everything was coming through on the speakerphone. And when I unplugged or shut off my car in the garage for about 2 minutes, I couldn't hear anything Neil was saying right before Nathan started speaking. And so I heard something about videos. I have a couple of questions. My first question is, am I correct in my understanding? Is Mint's eventually going towards a video only thing around the globe? Like, is that what they're going to offer video courses rather than in-person talk courses? I don't know if that's what I heard. I couldn't hear everything. It was coming through the speaker thing funny, and so anyway, am I wrong or correct in my understanding there?
I
Yeah,
see
I
that
can,
finger, Neil. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
that's me. Yeah. The answer is no.
Okay,
The video was only to help help during times when we couldn't directly get a person into prison and give our students some activity they could do on their own. And but we are committed to in-person teaching. That's our commitment. But you know,
okay,
we do have an online program. We do have videos, and there's the correspondence courses. But those are tools that we can use when we can't do what we primarily do, which we want to primarily do, and that's in-person teaching.
all right. My other question is, have you all, not to reinvent the wheel, but Third Mill has existed now for quite a long time in making videos, and I know they're readily available to anyone who wants to use them. Have we looked to see, okay, we need a course on Genesis. Here's Third Mill's course on Genesis. We can borrow that rather than make another video series on Genesis and save time, effort, and cost.
We had a partnership with Third Mill, and it didn't work out because we hardly used Third Mill materials, or our students didn't. The difference would be the videos that we're doing, the author of the course does the video. So this is one feature of Project 66, where our master level and doctorate level students are writing courses, and the video is one way in which they can share their course with others.
Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you.
For those who may not know what Project 66 is, Neil, would you explain that?
Sure. Project 66 is a master level and doctoral level course, or project, you might say, where the thesis at the master level, we ask people to write a commentary of book of the Bible between 75 and 125 pages. The reason why we did that was because in the first year, we got theses with all kinds of themes, and we couldn't use them for courses. And so we started with every country would develop commentaries on the 66 books of the Bible. So over 400 commentaries have been written, and we're working in 70 countries. So it's really grown, but it's one of the best courses that the student will take. In prison now, we've had two guys, Derek Crocker and Jeremy, Prather, have written 5 courses each, and the anecdotes that they have, like in prison, and their experiences are helpful for other inmates to identify with and for us to learn. So it's been a joy, reading these commentaries. And right now at Walker, there are about 3-4 guys that are working, writing their commentary. So this has been perhaps the highlight of Mintz. Totally surprised that we didn't plan it like as it came out, but it just really developed, and our students have been responding in all kinds of different languages, and we get some of our better Bible course materials from that.
Neil, I know, and a concern that has been expressed to me by a couple of different people is when we're using a video with a facilitator in a prison where we don't have one of our regular volunteers. So we're using a student facilitator. Is that the way that's working?
Well, in order to, there are different practices as to who can be a facilitator. Usually, I mean, the simplest way is we ask the chaplain, because you have to get started. So we asked the chaplain, could you recommend somebody who's responsible to be a facilitator? So that's how we initiate the facilitator's role. Where we like to be at is that those who graduate after they have taken 10 courses at a certain level, that those who graduate with one of our degrees, then they would be appointed as a facilitator. But you do have to start and umbrella these guys in. So what we have at Zephyr Hills, for example, we have a handful of master degree graduates. They've written their thesis. And so they have taught their courses at Zephyrhill. And now they are also teaching some other courses alongside of the we always keep the outside volunteer option open. That's very, very important. And at Zephyrhills, and Charles can speak to that, there's a good balance between the inmates, graduates, and the outside volunteers as they give classes. Charles, you want to say something to that effect?
Sure. So, I mean, now we do have, so Ron Edmondson as an MDiv, he's the facilitator, he's the inside facilitator, but he didn't always have an MDiv. I mean, you know, this thing it's been in there for 10 years. Mike Trainer, who's the guy that had the first MDiv, he was the facilitator prior to Ron John, and he had a degree on the outside in something non-religious, you know, but he didn't have a men's degree when he started facilitating it. But he was a very very intelligent guy, and you know, good Christian. He was the guy you wanted to have on, a very good administrative guy. So he moved on. Ron John's a facilitator for all the courses essentially, because there's a couple courses going on there, and typically he basically keeps track of the records, right? I mean, he doesn't teach all the classes. He is actually teaching one of his own right now, and it's because he wrote a course and he's teaching his own. But mostly what he does is he keeps the records, right? He inputs the grades. We got a little laptop that the inmates are able to use that got donated, which that really helps immensely if anybody or wherever they're working is able to facilitate getting a laptop with like the Wi-Fi and that kind of stuff removed that you guys could just store information on. That's really been good, because it also gives those guys the ability to work on their thesis and save it on the laptop. But anyway, so he basically just keeps the records. The classes that we've had that have outside teachers coming in to teach, which is the majority of them, vast majority of them, typically what they'll do is they'll give, Ron John will ask them, now that he's got an MDiv and now that he's kind of been around doing it for a while, he'll say, hey, do you want some help grading any of the tests, any of the finals? Do you want some help grading the papers? Typically, they do it themselves. He has helped with some papers a handful of times. And he's certainly capable. He's as capable as the teachers, honestly, to grade the papers, I'd say. But the majority of what he does is record keeping. And you really, that's very helpful. He's on site, 24/7. He's on site more than the chaplains are. He's able to collect stuff from guys, because not every guy gets to every class. It's prison. Sometimes stuff happens. They don't make it. He's able to collect stuff from guys that occasionally maybe the guy that's coming in and teaching can't get, because the guy that comes in is only there for 2 hours and he's there, the whole rest of the week. So I think it's good to have somebody, assuming they're, responsible, to be the kind of facilitator for handling that kind of stuff from the inside. And I think it's helpful. He's definitely got a job.
Yeah, and the idea that a facilitator would only use the DVD, that's an incomplete sentence. That wouldn't complete a course. We would not be satisfied with that. We need 16 hours of interaction between the teacher and the student, and we'd have to somehow balance that. Now, when everything was closed completely, there were situations where they used the DVD, saw the DVD in person or in the dorm, and then they did a correspondence course, which is based on journaling for 60 days straight, which is a lot of work on their part, but that was the way in which we wanted them to interact with the teacher. And now it does take a lot of time to correct that. And so you don't want to get into that situation if you don't have time to correct. But for myself, I love doing it. It's one of the most profound interactions that I have with the inmates. Besides Project 66, which is amazingly profound because they're interpreting the Bible. And that's the best ever.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Yeah,
So
just
Neil,
one of the-
go ahead, CJ.
Sorry, just one other comment on the DVDs. So, obviously, I think we focus on in-person teaching, somebody being in there and actually, being in person and teaching it, but having the DVDs, especially in you know, the last couple of years when we were closed, so many places are closed. I think having the DVDs is a good thing. Nathan, I think you did a good job. The one time I was out there, I thought you did a fine job. I mean, a great job, you know, handling all that stuff. I'd totally be on board with you taking that over if that worked that way. But just having them, I mean, so like at Zephyr Hills, they did get to do the Book of Jonah on DVD because nobody could get in to teach them. And so they all were able to come to the chapel and watch it. And they were also able to meet outside of that for extra time to finish the course. And probably most chapels, at least in the state of Florida, I'm sure most chapels elsewhere, will have a room with a TV and a DVD the guys are going to have access to if volunteers can't come in. And I don't think that's the first thing. I think that's kind of the emergency situation. But I think it's a good thing to have. And plus, just kind of up thought this. I mean, just having those things up on the website, you know, when you think about fundraising or think about talking to people about, you know, what you do. I mean, oh, check out, you know, Mints EDU. It's got some courses that we've taught, you know, look at this. And just as a way to, you know, to show off what, because people can't get in to see what you're doing in the prison. But if you can say, hey, look, this is some of the material that's being taught. Somebody might look at that while they're sitting around drinking coffee at home, you know, and be like, oh, that seems like a pretty legitimate thing, you know. So anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Thanks, CJ. So Neil, can you explain a little bit more clearly, because I'm not sure that I understand. Because Zephyr Hills is a great program at Zephyr Hills, but that's not typical of the prisons that we have, Zephyr Hills. So a prison where we don't have all those already trained students, we go into a place and we have 8 hours of recorded lectures that the students watch. Now they need to get another 8 hours with a prisoner facilitator where we don't have somebody going in. How does that work? What happens for those other 8 hours?
Yeah, what you just described sounds like a total lockdown situation.
Right.
Yeah, well,
We're not even just a total lockdown situation, but we don't have a volunteer. We don't have somebody coming in.
yeah. Okay, I'll take it one step further back. How do we get into prisons most of the time? Most of the time it's a transfer student, a transfer inmate student who is transferred. And then what we suggest, you say, hey, write us so we can make a spiritual visit. And so if that's granted, then we visit that inmate and leave him a couple of correspondence courses, just so he can keep working on his on finishing his first 10 courses. And then we talk with the chaplain and we say, hey, do you think there's a possibility of getting a group started? Now, in Zephyr Hills, the chaplain served as our guardian angels. They make sure we were, you know, bonding with the right people, with the call outs and so forth. And so we had the support of the chapels. Now, if we don't have the support of the chaplain, it'd be very difficult. But then by that time, we would hopefully have an outside volunteer. And that's why I was very interested in what Mark was saying and how Metanoia is working with local churches, because I foresee that if you have a Metanoia volunteer who would like to teach, that would make a really good outside volunteer teacher for us. And
Right.
so we need that. We need that. And in fact, we really couldn't proceed beyond just correspondence unless we had the outside volunteer teacher. And once that happens, like at Sumter, it grows as the volunteer teachers, like at Sumter, would invite others to get involved. And all at once, the program starts to grow. Now, the program grows mostly through the transfer of inmates. And that's because we don't have a strategy for, you know, it's just more popular level type of ministry where by word of mouth, we go from one prison to the next.
Okay, so I've got Mark and Nathan raising their hands. Nathan, why don't you go first?
Mine's real quick. I just wanted to say, that's why today was my first day at Sumter Work Camp.
The only reason why I taught at this new prison today was because one of the inmates that's in this new prison is a transfer from the Sumter main camp. And he is a Mintz student. And so he transferred in October, and then he put in a request for a spiritual visit.
Right.
And here we are today. So it's just how God is sending missionaries within the system. It's pretty awesome.
Mark?
I think one of the things Metanoia can bring to the table is the what we've developed in our regional directors. If you look at Jason, he's our regional director for Central Florida. Well, there are multiple prisons in his area now, right? And so as he visits presbyteries, as he visits churches, and not just PCA churches, but to visit URC churches, visit OPC churches, visit Reformed Baptist churches, he's going to naturally find volunteers who want to go in and teach. That scratches an itch they have. There are many people that want to teach. They have never thought about prison. They never thought, hey, there's a venue where I could teach. And so we've seen this happen in multiple places. I mean, you were here, Neil, when we had our first meeting about Walker starting the seminary there. I think we had like 6 or 8 guys in the room that were there to learn about it, to potentially be professors there. And I think 3 or 4 of them did. Then a couple of others came on board that we found. And so there, as long as you're visiting churches in a region and recruiting the people, there will be servants that God will pull into this. The Holy Spirit just pulls them to do it. And so that's the strategy Metanoia has. I'm constantly looking for people. We have a guy in California. We have a guy in Texas. We now have a guy in Florida. We have a guy in Georgia. So we have the 4 largest prison systems right now where we at least have one person there. Now, Florida needs a couple, California needs a couple, and Texas needs a couple because they're all big. And Georgia will need a couple. And we're looking at Jeremy now to say how long before Jeremy Prather can really be used, because he's got to get off of paper. He's got to be able to get cleared to go into the prison, but he can certainly visit churches and do things out here to raise up people. And so that seems to be a strategy that is right now is working anyway.
Yeah, and it's something that we don't have. So it makes for a perfect fit, as you were mentioning before.
I also wanted to say, I didn't say this before, but I do want to say, even though I work for M&A and that we're connected to M&A, anyone can work with us who's not PCA. In other words, my regional director in California, he's a teaching elder in the RPCNA, the Reformed Presbyterian Church North America. So his General Assembly and his presbytery have called him to work with M&A and with Metanoia as their prison ministry guy. But you don't have to be PCA to work with us. We will take anyone who's solidly Reformed. So just throwing that out there if there was any concerns about that.
It's interesting. I jump in here. The guys at TAB, the PCA church, all those guys are Baptist guys that are trying to find a home church. They're the ones going into prison. So maybe it's in the Baptist DNA or something. I don't know.
Jason?
Yeah, I'd like a little more clarification, and it's probably just me not knowing Mintz well enough, but I hear facilitators, that's one term I use, and then also maybe more of a professor route. You know, if you take the extremes, those are 2 different ways of doing this ministry. And is it a both and, like ideally we'd like a professor who's teaching the class, but if we don't have that, let's bring in a facilitator? Because when I'm thinking about recruiting, am I only to go after those who already have a master's level? Or what if there's just a godly man in the class or in my church who doesn't have any formal training, who could be a facilitator, but probably doesn't have the background to be an instructor? I just don't quite understand, like, is it a both and approach, or are we leaning more heavily toward one or the other?
Oh, shall I answer that?
Yeah.
It depends what situation you have, but in our Mintz manual, and it's also mentioned in the Mintz Seminary in Prison Manual, we have facilitators teachers, professors, and so forth. There's different levels of let's say teachers. Now, let's say someone did not have a BA and but wanted to teach theology and Bible in prison. We would recommend that that person not only teach, but that he would also take courses with us at the same time, so that he can be equipped as well as the inmates. And so we have several of those situations. And so we look for teachers, but for example, in Zephyrhills, a couple of the guys were teaching Bible before we got there. And so we asked them, hey, why don't you teach Bible for us? Now, there happens to be two guys with doctorate degrees in theology, Dr. White and Dr. Young. And so they came well prepared. Now, you don't find that all over the place, but you do look for people who have a teaching interest, who have taught before. You know, it would not be wise if this was their first experience in teaching. They should really teach in their local church prior to teaching in prison. And so you go with what you get. Now, when we see a situation where there's a low level of academic credentials, then we just try to help them, you know, get the next level for sure. And then we're all learning together. We would love to have all of our teachers take men's courses and get the next degree. That's one reason I have 5 doctorates instead of 3, because I took both of the men's doctorates. In fact, I was in the first class in both of them because I was also, you know, working on these programs and courses. So everybody should upgrade as much as you can, and we don't force it. We don't, you know, we have a different title for someone who's finished our master's master degree and have written a course. They become a Mintz professor. So, but that's just the title, really. They're still teachers, and we teach at all levels, but we want everybody to upgrade. And so you don't know what the Lord has in the local community of volunteers, but he'll provide somebody who's able to teach. And we use the philosophy that the best way to learn is to teach. That's one of our guiding principles. It's not original, it comes from Hendricks, Teaching to Change Lives. So the best way to learn is to teach, and the best way to teach is to model what you're doing. And so we want everybody to be studying. Discipleship, everybody studies.
So if I'm hearing correctly, the priority and the hope would be that everyone would be an instructor teaching, but is it one of those things where if that's not a possibility, someone's not quite ready to be at that level, that they could join together with a DVD course and be the facilitator? Is that an option that we're looking for as not primary, but secondary?
Yeah, you can do that.
That's what I do. My whole ministry is like, what do you do? Why am I giving you all this money? And I say, because the orphan training, I push play. That's why you give me all the money. Because my orphan training material is so good. I give them the humanness, pray for them, grieve with them, but I'm mainly pushing play, but I'm bringing the live instruction. But believe it or not, there's some good material and you don't always have to recreate it. But I do agree, when you teach it, you definitely grow. It's a great thing to do both, but I do play. And I think there's a lot of ministry going on with me pushing play. And then just following up with questions and encouraging people that goes along with the course. The humanity and the Christian love goes with the course by just being there. So if someone wants to be in charge of the DVD and push play, I do that in my ministry, and I see a lot of God stuff happening.
Okay. So Jason, your question is really good. It's something that, for example, go ahead and Zoom me sometime, and then we'll look at the manual. And in fact, talking with Barry before the meeting, he'll announce what we'll do as far as follow-up. We need to go through the Mint Seminary in Prison manual. We need to go through it paragraph by paragraph and if you've tuned into some of the other activities prior to our meeting today, you will see the English speaking world going through the manual. You'll see the Hispanics going through the manual, and they're at different levels.
Okay, thanks. Are there any other questions about the use of DVDs and facilitators?
Well, I'd like to say something, Barry.
Yes. Hi, Bill.
I've been with Mints for approximately 3 years. And I started by speaking 90% of the time. Class hardly said anything at that time. Then as time went by, they started asking more questions and wanting to discuss more. So in that phase, I said,
Hey,
I
sorry.
have to.
We ran out of power. We're back again. Thanks.
At that phase of my teaching, I said, we have to stop the discussion now because we have to cover 10 pages of curriculum. And now, in teaching Deuteronomy, I'm in another phase where the students are discussing Deuteronomy with each other, and I can sit there for 5 whole minutes without saying anything. I'm a facilitator. I make sure that they're talking about Deuteronomy, but what they're doing is they're giving information about their personal lives that I would never ask myself. They tell each other pertaining to Deuteronomy, how Deuteronomy affects their personal lives. They volunteer information on how they got into crime. They tell a few things about their married life with their wife, whether they're divorced or not. 1 or 2 of them have told why they committed murder. They are telling each other things I would never ask. And if you have 12 students, that's not very many, and 4 of them have committed murder, the way they get attention is not by what I have to say necessarily, but the way they get their attention is they just share their personal lives with each other. So as far as covering the curriculum is concerned right now, they know enough about the curriculum to do good work, to hand in homework assignments and everything. They know that much. But I consider the real pastoral healing part of my ministry is just to let them talk about Deuteronomy and relate it to their personal lives. And that's the way I get to know about their personal lives. I'd never asked them that information. So that's what I have to say. I have to say this, that they're motivated to stay there for more than 2 hours. That's one thing. And also, they could spend a lot more time than 8 lessons on these long chapters, these long books of the Bible. So that's what I have to say.
So in terms of class time, our student interacting with teacher facilitator time, 16 hours is the minimum, but you can do more than that. Bill, that's up to you. If you would like to spend more than 8 2-hour sessions doing Deuteronomy with those students, you may do so. It's 16 hours is the minimum of what's required in order to get credit.
Yeah. We have one chaplain who's spending 4 months on the book of Jonah. So he has Jonah in the fish for about 3 weeks.
Where is that, Neil?
That's Wakulla, Maine.
Okay, is that,
Yeah.
George?
George, yeah.
Yeah,
He's,
that's
he's,
funny.
he says, I want these guys to just be able to talk and we're just gonna spend, he's gonna do double the time. And then I gave some of the guys the opportunity to do accelerated stuff through correspondence, but that's a lot of work. So they make that choice. So we give them the option. But George is doing a good job. His guys are very much involved in his course, but he just has chosen to take the long route.
I'd just like to say that I'm just amazed at how they share information about their lives with each other that I would never question them about myself.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah, but before you do, I just want to say that Bill speaking reminded me, and I don't know that Mark knows this, I think I share with the other guys, that Chaplain Diaz recently passed away.
Mhm. Yeah.
So Mark met Chaplain Diaz. He made a visit to Miami, and she got him approved so he could come in and met the guys in the class there. So wanted to let you know that, Mark. But so Chaplain Godbolt is now the senior chaplain there. Go ahead, Chris. You had a question, comment?
Well, I forgot when I was teaching the course, because it's been a couple of years. When you're teaching a class at the prison, I guess if it's the typical class is what, 8 weeks, correct?
Yeah, 8 weeks, 2 hours.
So that'd be 8 lessons.
Yes.
Eight lessons, and but it doesn't have to be finished within that exact 8-week period, like, correct? I mean, like Bill is talking about, they start telling stories in the class. If it's okay, correct? I mean, if from what I understand, that the one gentleman was teaching Jonah, and it's now taken 4 months, and that's okay. Is that?
Yeah. So let's just go over this. And this came up earlier in the general meeting this morning, where the new vice president was going over the main MINTS manual. There are 5 parts to every MINTS course. So there are 16 hours of FaceTime or student interaction time. There is every MINTS course is written in 8 lessons, which has 10 questions. And so there is the reading of the 8 lessons, the course material, and students answering the 80 questions. They are to do a reading assignment. For undergraduate students, it's 300 pages. For master's level students, it's 600 pages. Write a reading report. They are to write an essay and to take a final exam. So those are the 5 parts of every MINTS course. And in order to get credit for the course, students must do all 5 parts. Now, they don't necessarily have to do well at all 5 parts, but you can't skip one of those parts and get credit for the course. If a student were to skip one of those parts, they would have to get an incomplete for that course. But the FaceTime or the interaction time of 16 hours, that's a minimum amount. It could be more than that.
Okay,
Up to the professor or teacher, how they want to teach the course.
Yeah, so if the prison said, you have this time slot every Wednesday, you could go 3 hours here as long as you want. And if I just carried on the course and it could get done technically in 12 weeks, if I go 16 weeks and we're having pastoral stuff like Bill was talking about, that's okay.
That is okay.
Okay.
You will probably find, though, may not be okay with your students, because they want to get courses done.
Oh, okay.
They want to earn their certificates. They want to earn their diplomas. They want to earn their degrees. Typically, that's what I find, that students want to get done as much as they can, as quickly as they can.
Okay. So I have another question.
Yes.
So I was just thinking in particular from what I'm, doing and would like to do. So if I go to a prison to present the Gospel of Mark as an evangelic evangelism tool. And there is no Mint student there or anybody there. If I talk to the chaplain ahead of time, and, you know, they're obviously going to know I'm coming and everything, because they're going to be one welcoming me. And if I say, hey, do you have someone that when I come up there that I can meet, who you think is a responsible person that would be a facilitator, and they don't have, as Jason was asking about the qualifications, and that facilitator doesn't even have a BA, or not even outside of prison, doesn't have a theological education or no education as formal education, there's maybe a high school degree. I could say, well, you know what we'll do is we have a DVD study, and I could bring that with, and that facilitator could show the DVD and then work through that to get a Mintz study center started. They could begin that way, and then, as we discussed, the idea is to challenge them to continue to grow and to learn, and
Yes.
okay.
Yes,
So
yes.
because I'm then a big proponent of DVDs, because I see that as a great tool mechanism to going into the thousands of prisons that we're not in. And if I go there, we could launch a study center if we have one person who says, I will be there to play the DVD, and that person is obviously in correspondence with someone from Mintz. It would be me. And how do they correspond? How does that inmate correspond with the outside Mintz faculty member?
It has to be in writing by letters.
Yeah, letters.
Nathan?
Florida, it's really supposed to go through the chaplain. If you're somebody that's consistently coming in as a volunteer, you can't be writing. Most institutions kind of hold to this rule. You can't be writing the inmate there. So technically, the chaplain should send you, whatever communication the facilitator has for you.
Okay.
Just keep yourself out of trouble,
We'll get to you in a minute, Mark. Nathan, you're next.
Just a quick note on the video production. George Waters, the gentleman that volunteered to help us last year, he purchased himself with his own money the machine that produces multiple DVDs at the same time, and he also purchased the machine that prints out the label that we stick to the top of the DVD so that it looks official, because we can't go into Mintz with a DVD that's handwritten, or it has to be in wrapping in cellophane, because it could be full of porn, right? So it's got to be something official looking. And so he has that machine, and Neil's going to talk to him. But if we, for any reason, would not have access to those machines, our video production would stop unless there was another source that we produced the hardware, the hard copies. So if Metanoia knows a guy who knows a guy, who can produce DVDs, that's the only reason I bring it up. Just networking now while we're talking about it.
Great.
In fact, I do know a guy. He's 2 floors above me at our church. Our church produces things, and I believe we have the machine. Walker State Prison has a choir, or they did a few years ago, and our guy went down there, our choir director went down, and they produced a CD. And so Jason got those made and did things, and I believe our church has a duplicating machine. I'd have to find out for sure if we still have it or not, but we used to have a TV studio at our church years and years ago when Ben Hayden was the pastor. So there's all kinds of equipment around. But the question I wanted to ask, the warning I wanted to give to Chris, is simply think about every time you go and leave a DVD at a place is a student that you need to grade, or someone's going to have to grade their work. And I could see that all of a sudden you've got 50 students in 50 different prisons in 7 states, and that can become logistically a nightmare in essence. And so you want to I love the zeal, but I want you to be thinking about what the result is. The other side of it for me personally is I'm not against videos. I watched plenty of them, and I think Bill said this, when you go into a facility, you are going there, you're doing unto Jesus something, you're visiting Jesus where he is. And there's a love that's communicated by your presence that can't be communicated through a video.
Yeah, that's right.
As Charles said, videos are the last resort, in my opinion. There's something where they would be really good is if there were guys in a security housing unit or a protective housing unit where they aren't getting very many volunteers, high security, that's one thing. But if we can get volunteers, by all means, the volunteers are sending an unwritten message that says, I love you, you have worth, Jesus loves you. And that's huge because the state's sending a different message. The state's saying, I don't love you. I'm going to keep you in here as long as I can. You're not, when he gets out, it's going to be, you're not welcome in this neighborhood. You're not going to get a job, or like all those other things. So we as the church are sending a huge message by being there and by getting people to go. And also the other side of the logistics of if you get these individuals, 2 or 3 people per prison somewhere, when you do a show, do one of your presentations, that's good. But Barry found this out pretty quickly. He was trying to set up some things in different places, and suddenly he's overwhelmed in the number of things he's personally got to grade. Right, Barry? I mean, you could talk about that a little bit, that became a very big issue, that suddenly you've got 16 lessons on your desk that you didn't have last week because all the mail hit today. So something to keep in mind with that.
Yeah. Well said. And that is exactly, I was just thinking of the DVD being just a launch in case they're after already seeking a facilitator, a personal person, et cetera. And if those doors aren't there, just use the DVD to get it going with the idea and the intention of not always using the DVD, but just to get it going in case there's not a person there. But I agree. Yeah. And I would just give all the classes to Barry to grade.
Thank you, Greg. I appreciate that so much.
Yeah. That's big wisdom. That's what I've learned, is that my enthusiasm gets me in trouble, because to be faithful, then you have to be prepared to grade, and you don't have any administrative help. You need time to grade. And so I'm trying to recruit people who want to grade, so I can keep doing my thing. But that is the big thing I realize. You want it to grow, but then if you want to do all the work, do you have time to do all the work that's necessary?
Yeah, I mean, the idea that pops right in my head, and this is the purpose of the Zoom meeting, is to discuss ideas like this. But I could see that as a wonderful, a good problem to have, and to go to my local church and to and having something that they can do. Hey, listen, I got something, that you can actually do. I've got this students coming in, these coming in. You start getting them grading and everything, and but yeah, thank you. I got my little
Jason.
grandson here. I gotta just give him something to do in a minute.
Jason?
So in Orlando, Florida, probably most of you know, there's RTS, Reformed Theological Seminary. I'm wondering, as a coordinator and trying to think about raising volunteers, are students people that I can pull from? How much education do they need before they can start teaching a class? These are the kinds of questions I'm just not quite sure about, and I'm thankful for this time that I can hash some of that out.
Yep. Mark?
No,
Can I beg you not to ask the students? And the reason I'm going to say that is, think about when you were a student. Did you have a lot of free time to grade, say, 18 papers a week and 18 homework lessons a week, and spend a couple hours going to the prison and teaching and coming out? Did you have that kind of free time in seminary? And so the zeal is going to be there. There's going to be a lot of guys that you're going to go, because I've taught seminary classes for RTS several times, and the guys are like, yeah, how do I sign up? And I'm like, when you get to your pastoral call, give me a call and we'll sign you up then. But right now you've got a family, or you've got your studies, you've got a church that you're interning at, or whatever's going on. You don't have a lot of free time. It's, at least that's most seminary. There's some guys who might, but by and large, I would offer, because I get the same thing when I go to Covenant College or one of these Christian campuses and I talk, people invariably want to be involved in the correspondence ministry. And I'm like, you've got your studies, you've got a social life, you've got a church life. wait till you're done with college and then please sign up. And I know it sounds counterintuitive to turn away volunteers, but we also have to think about what these people, I don't know about anybody else, but I've taken on more than I can handle at times. And I sometimes have to be backed off and say, okay, let's reassess what I can do. So that'd be my only discouragement is students are busy. Wow.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. My only slight pushback would be when I was doing my internship, I had a lot of hoops to jump through and a lot of examples to say I have done X, Y, or Z. And some of that was prison ministry, some of it was teaching opportunities. And so I'd want to be really mindful of not overloading them. But at the same time, I think there are some cases where over a summer or what have you, it might be a good fit.
Yeah, good point. That's very good. I think also working with a presbytery, the presbyteries, I don't know how many there are around you, but working with their credentials committees to say, okay, what does a guy who's under care need as far as, like you said, internships? They need to do some hospital time, they need to do some prison time. You could then recruit those people to kill two birds with one stone, serving the prisoner as well as getting their check mark on their internship.
Barry, I have a question pertaining to Chris's ministry. Did I hear correctly that someone suggested that when he gives his performance concerning Mark, he has to get some feedback from the audience? Did I hear that correctly? Or he can just present his drama and he doesn't have to have any feedback?
Well, I don't know that have to, but I think he wants to. Don't you, Chris?
Yeah, after my performance, we have a Q&A time. And so I have like at Walker, Barry had a microphone and he would hand it to them. And so everybody hears the question. It was a large room and there was a lot of inmates there. But even at churches, when I perform, even at a theater, 2 regional theaters I did, I let it be an open mic and have people ask questions. So I definitely want the interaction. And then there's time after group questions that the individuals can come and we can talk and everything.
But you don't, but you don't have to have any paperwork.
Well, so for the idea of using it to initiate, launch, plant a MINT study center, I was saying that what is the advantage with the DVD is if now obviously this is all pre-planned, there's been discussion with the chaplain and the warden, or if that comes in the conversation about, hey, is there someone there? Because not only am I coming to share this Gospel of Mark, but I'm coming there as a representative of Miami International Seminary and Metanoia, and tell them what we offer and these ministries offer. And if you have a person you recommend a person that could be a facilitator to teach a class, and depending on where they're at, and you help me out, guys, but I'm thinking that if they say, well, we happen to have a guy who is a former pastor, he committed a crime, he's in here, and he's got then all right, great, we have a qualified teacher. Yes, go ahead, Neil.
Yeah. As you introduce the course, you will have to have one more thing in your equation. You do need a volunteer teacher. And you usually don't find in the beginning, you don't find that amongst the students yet, because you're getting to know the students and you don't know their background. The chaplain's recommendation is very important, but I think if I think of all the prisons which have been successfully turned into study centers, there has been an outside visitation. And so like in Tallahassee, we have Stephen Bradford, who on a weekly basis visits up to 5 prisons. And now he has a volunteer, Les Starad, who's going to help him out because he got hurt and he couldn't visit the prisons. But anyway, you do need the outside influence other than the inmates. Now at Zephyr Hills, they finally got to the point where the inmates could do a lot of the facilitating. But again, as Charles explained, the guys from the outside kept going. The outside influence is important. So I think in your equation is you would need to pray that the Lord would have either the chaplain. Now in Mayo, the chaplain became that person to be the teacher, the first teacher, or somebody from the outside who could come once a week at least. And that could be like Steve Bradford in Tallahassee. He had 5 prisons in his circuit, and he went to one prison. You know, I mean, he was a retired preacher, pastor, and he loved doing it. And now I came alongside of him because he was not a good record keeper. And so I had to make sure that the grades were properly recorded and so forth. So I'd come by once every 3 months and make sure the records were in place. And now I'm handing that over in Northern Florida to Tommy Peterson. And in Central Florida, I'm handing it over to Jason Dalton. And I hope to have that done by the end of next month.
I had in my mind one context in the example, and that was, this was already talking to Mark Casson, representative from Metanoia, already talking to Barry and Mintz Prison Ministry and saying, hey, a prison in Alabama has invited me, and I have a sponsor to send me. And after already talking to Barry and already talking to Mark, we find no representative there, no outside person. In that context, I'm saying I could come there with the talk to the chaplain, have a facility, at least to get something going. So I think but the ideal thing would be, again, it's by the invitation of the prison. I right now have someone in the state of Florida she is I forgot her title, but she basically works for all the prisons in the state of Florida, both federal and state. And she's getting me all the names of volunteer coordinators, chaplains, wardens, deputy wardens, et cetera. And she's excited about what I'm doing. And she says, I will get you in just all these prisons that if you're not going to be able to keep up with it.
A lot.
And I said, I need the sponsorship to send me there. So what I would do is, obviously I would talk to you guys and say, okay, this store is opened up and I got sponsored, and see what we can do collectively. And if not, I was just saying in that scenario, if there was absolutely no one, at least we have the DVD, because that's what I was dovetailing on, is the conversation about the DVD. And I seem like we're going to have a vote on it or something. So I'm endorsing the DVD for that application. It could be wonderful.
That's very helpful.
Jason?
So to go back to my question about RTS students, Mark, I really appreciate the concern, and I think that's wise. Let's just say the perfect scenario happens. They're taking a semester off. They have free time, whatever it is. Let's just say it's the best scenario. Are they qualified? Like, I still don't know exactly who can teach and who can't teach a class.
Yeah, and so like one of the things that we were talking about in the general meeting this morning with the new vice president and the main Mintz manual, the manual for the whole seminary, is that there is a provision for someone who does not have a master's degree, who is teaching he can teach a Mintz course. And in fact, by teaching that course, he earns credit towards a Mintz master's. You can do that for 5 courses. You can get 15 credits that way towards a master's degree with Mintz. So you can teach with just a bachelor's degree, and you can get credit towards a master's degree. So that's in the manual for Maine Mintz Seminary. But we have other people that don't even have bachelor's degrees, but are theologically educated, who will teach a course for us, and then they are earning credit towards a bachelor's degree. So
That's the
yes.
idea.
So yes, it's on a case-by-case basis, and that would be kind of up to you. Does this person have enough education, knowledge to be able to teach a course on his own? And then he can apply that towards a Mintz degree if he wants. But yes, certainly you could use an RTS student to teach a course. To answer your specific question. When I was down, let me just say, when I was down in Miami, I had a guy teaching that didn't have a high school diploma. He had come from Brazil without a high school diploma. He had worked for years as a journalist, was very well educated, even though he didn't have a credential. And he was teaching for us at Dade Correctional in Miami. So it's on case-by-case basis. It's up to you. And you can talk to me, talk to Neil, about specific people.
Well said.
I had a
So-
question about the quality
Yeah.
control of the quality control of the classes, like Project 66. You have these students writing commentaries on the Bible. Neil, is that you and some others who actually looking at make sure it's of Reformed theology? And like you asked it, like I want to write a course on Mark, and I'm giving it to you guys, and you guys are making sure someone's got to be the
Yeah.
quality control. I'm only asking this because I'm going to have to share this with, I know, some other people.
Sure. Good question. Now, if you're at the thesis level of your master's, then you would have a mentor, and that mentor usually is your first reader. And then one of the guys in the system, like myself, would become the second reader. So you always have two readers. Now, Julian has done a lot of second reading, and then it gets too much for him, then we give it to Alan Vanderpool. And if it gets too much for him, we find somebody else in the system. So we do
Neil,
take care of, yeah.
Not everybody here knows who Julian is, so why don't you explain who Julian is?
Okay, Julian is the coordinator for all English-speaking programs. And so if
Julian's
somebody's at the,
And he's
So-
becoming the new president for MITS.
and he also, yeah, he'll also be the new president. Now, as the English-speaking coordinator, he has to eyeball all of the theses that come through. And now I happen to be the Spanish as well. I'm not in the English-speaking world technically, but for the Spanish thesis, I'm handing over that responsibility to Isao Reyes. And between him and Jaime Morales, who's the online guy, he's the second reader. They make sure that the commentary is in good shape and according to our standards and so forth.
Yeah, so to answer your question, Chris, there are two readers who have to approve every course that's written.
Mhm. And as far as being reformed, what's so interesting is that if people stick close to the Bible, they usually, if they say what the Bible says, they usually don't get into trouble. But we've had students who were Armenian. They were in Armenian churches and denominations, and they fulfilled the academic requirements of a course. But we said to them, you've written a wonderful Armenian course, but we can't use it because we're committed to Reformed theology. But you can pass. In fact, the guy got his doctorate and we didn't use any of his courses. That was in Spanish, but that was only one guy out of maybe 300 Spanish theses, just one guy. And yeah,
So for people who are writing courses, there are three things that could happen to a course once it's completed. It could be rejected or failed. It does not meet the requirements for the course. It could meet the requirements for completing a degree or completing a course, but we don't publish it because it's not reformed or there's some other issues with it. Or it can be approved and published, and it goes on the MINTS website and then can be used by other MINTS centers around the world. I did want to move on to another topic. I think this has been a great discussion, and thank you for this. I want to move on to another discussion, and that is a core curriculum. This also came up in the English-speaking conversation earlier today for MINTS, mostly in Africa, where there's a lot of English programs there. This was came up earlier, and this has come up repeatedly in our prison ministry. Do we want to have a core curriculum, at least for the first 10 courses, that is a unified curriculum that is used in all of our locations, and that would be the first step going in. So that would be question number one. So do we want to have a common core curriculum of at least the first 10 courses? And then, well, there's going to be a second part of that, but I'll let Mark go ahead and respond to that first.
Well, so as somebody who started a study center who had never done this before, I leaned heavily on you, Barry. And you gave, it's exactly the question I asked you, what courses do we start with? And you said, generally, I start with the hermeneutics class and this Bible class. And so I asked you, what should we do? And you gave me, I think, 10 classes, and we fit that. Well, that was for Walker, and I got that study center going. Well, at Perry Correctional over in South Carolina, I happened to talk to the chaplain and say, hey, would you be interested in seminary there? And he said, what do you got? And I said, well, here's Mintz. Okay, what do I do? He asked me now I'm Barry trying to tell him. So I gave him the same exact outline that Barry gave me. And I personally think that's extremely helpful, that especially as it grows, if there is a uniformity going on amongst courses, curriculum, how you're doing things, it seems like it's kind of like, I think RTS, if you go to RTS Jackson or you go to RTS Orlando, or you go to RTS Charlotte, the courses are pretty much taught in a similar way, and different professors teaching a particular course, but you're going to be in the same track, right? And so I think it's helpful. It doesn't mean you have to be stuck to it, but personally, you're going to be dealing with people who've never done this before. And so if it's a package where you can say, here you go, boom, these are the books you're going to want to get, these are the things, typically it becomes a very easy formatted thing to do, because it's going to be we want to replicate it, right? That's the goal, is to replicate it. And so the more standardization, I think the more you can do that. That's my personal thought.
Yeah, Neil?
Yeah. I would suggest this would be something we do at the next meeting. Like if we have 6 meetings during the year, let's do this. Let's go through the what you proposed. And my observation when I read this, and it's good to have some background on this, we recommended that at the BA level, the associate and BA level, we study Bible books, and that at the master level, you would take the epistles, the minor prophets, the major prophets, the Pentateuch. But because most of the guys start at the BA level, you just give them a taste as to what Bible study is, and you give them manageable proportions. And because when I looked at the list, it looked like we were trying to do a Master of Divinity curriculum for the certificate and associates and bachelors. And I think we needed to take one step back and say, okay, let's have a unified approach, and let's take one of the epistles and one of the Pentateuchs and one of the writings and one of the history, and just one Bible book. And then later, when they get at the master's level, they look at the whole genre of like synoptic gospels or the epistles and the so forth. So that's one thing I would recommend. But let's look at it, and we can adopt a unified curriculum approach. And I think, yeah, it's necessary.
I have a question to Neil, and the question is, does Mintz teach TULIP? And I find that if we can agree on how to teach TULIP, that has a great influence on hermeneutics.
Okay, so what's TULIP, Bill?
That's Calvin's teaching, total depravity and so forth.
Okay, so it's total depravity, unlimited, unconditional election, limited atonement, irresistible grace, and perseverance of the saints. On February 12, I'm walking my daughter down the aisle to give her to her future husband, and I'm going to ask her if she knows TULIP. And then I'm going to ask him, and if they fail, they're going to have to, they've got a problem.
But, I didn't get the answer to my question. Does Mintz teach it?
Well, we do teach Doctrines of Grace. That's a course, and that covers TULIP. So yes, Doctrine of Salvation course would deal with those matters. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. Mintz theology would be consistent with that. Yes.
Yeah.
Jason?
My internet has been a little spotty recently, so hopefully you guys can hear me and it's not dropping. One thing I'd like for us to think about is not just a core curriculum, say the first 10, which I think is really valuable and good for replication and scalability and everything. But we really want to hone in on sort of the best classes first. Hopefully there's a lot of consistency where there's not a massive divide between really good classes and only subpar. But even if there's, when we start a program, we're really kind of making a case for the students that it's worthwhile their time, that it's going to be beneficial. And some classes are going to be better than others. I mean, even if they're close, there is going to be sort of better ones versus worse ones. At least that's how it was in my seminary. I liked all my classes, but some were fantastic. And honing in on those ones that are really home runs can kind of set the stage of, all right, I'm ready to sign up for the next class. This was incredible. So I don't know. I've only done 2 classes. I have no idea what that range looks like. I don't know what sort of.
Well, I can tell you the best course that Mintz has is Deuteronomy.
No, actually, the best course is.
And buy your book, right?
That's right.
But
And you can buy my book for only $17.99. Here it is.
Oh, Gary, yeah, the best course that you can teach is one that you have written yourself. That is true, because you've had the maximum preparation for that course. And so we'd like you to become, writers as well as, teachers. Now, if all teachers are different. And so, if they have to teach epistles, maybe they'll take James written by Michael Trainer in Zephyr Hills, or they'll take James as written by somebody else somewhere else. So you have to do your own research as to which book of James you want to teach. You have that freedom. And you can also use other people's commentaries on James for reading, because at the associate and the bachelor's level, you have to read 300 pages. And so you can use, we like you to use Mintz courses, but other courses and other commentaries as well, obviously. But, we really promote our own authors, and because they're living and you can actually communicate with them. And if they teach, better yet. Like Charles has written 3 courses now, and his course on Ezekiel is a winner. I read it and I go, wow, this guy really did a nice job. Well, he happened to be a Marine or a soldier, and he was in the Middle East, and he knew what he was talking about when he was talking about the geography, and it was a really good course. But then I know Charles, and I know a little bit about Ezekiel, and I thought he did a great job. Now that was a personal preference, but we love for our authors to be teachers, and that's sort of a goal that we have in Mintz. It's a value. It's one of the values of our seminary that we promote.
Yeah, I did not want today to get into what the specifics of a core curriculum might be, but just more, are we in agreement that we ought to have a core curriculum that we promote from location to location in the seminary and prison?
So it makes sense to me.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, and again,
Yeah, I think
listening
a
to the
class
earlier-
like hermeneutics. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Jason. What
I
were you
was
saying?
saying, I think a class like hermeneutics is going to be a foundational class. It's going to help people understand how to read the Bible. So it just makes sense to me that certain classes are going to be foundational, that we can build on other ones later.
Let me give you a background. I agree, Jason, that hermeneutics is foundational for Bible. For all of our 5 areas, Bible, theology, ministry, church history, and missions and electives, we have chosen an emphasis. So for Bible, it was hermeneutics that would end up in the student writing their own course, own commentary. In theology, it's apologetics. Now, some would say it should be Reformed theology. Well, Reformed theology is going to be there, but apologetics is something that is, we all agreed that was really we're not a denomination. We're not we are PCA, we're Reformed Baptist, but where we do all agree is that we have to defend the faith. And the best way we know how is the biblical and Reformed faith. So apologetics is our emphasis. And as far as ministry teaching, You know, some seminaries, it's discipleship, and others it's evangelism, and others it's preaching. But for us, it's teaching. And for missions, we haven't missions in church history. We don't have a school of philosophy, but a lot of our, we've had some good histories that have been written. Like, for example, in your situation, you taught ancient church history, and you in your conversation with me, Jason, you said, you know, I wouldn't mind writing a course on that. And see, we would say, go ahead, do it. Even though we have one, if you can bring to the table more of that, that's great. And we don't just have to have one course for ancient church history. We can have a variety. In fact, every country can write their own course if they want to. In Africa, they're writing courses on African church history and all that. So that's sort of the emphasis that we have in those 4 departments. And then electives, that's just wide open. But at the beginning of our of MINTS, we spent a lot of time on the philosophy of Christian education in Spanish and in English. We just went to town on that because we were trying to define MINTS. And so those have been the 5 emphases that we've had so far.
Nathan?
Again, I'm the new kid on the block. My only 2 cents worth is with the core subjects that we would ever land on, just taking into account that, for instance, me, I settled in really well with certain topics, certain subjects. So serving the least of these is a class I taught last year, and it was great. And it was right in my wheelhouse. In fact, one of my goals with MINTS is to someday write a course on addiction recovery counseling and include that. And because that's part of my story of redemption, that's in my wheelhouse. And Barry, you and I have talked about that. But I'm not as sharp and passionate about ancient church history. I took the class, I got an A+. It was a great class, but it's just, it doesn't fire my rockets. Now I'm willing to teach it, but I also believe just that God gives us certain giftings and certain passions as well. And sometimes, you know, Jason is really great at history classes. And when I talked to the guys last week, they were all excited about medieval church history that's starting up next week because Jason is a great history teacher.
He's a good
and he's able to add things that he, in his knowledge, dates and times and places that really bring it to life, that add context and stuff. So that's my only point is, I don't mind playing by the rules. I'm never going to push back. But if there were 10 courses, I know that maybe a handful of them, you know, I'm going to do really well at those. I'm going to be really passionate and engaged in those. And then there might be others where I'm just going to teach them. But it's not, you know, it's broccoli to me. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying that everything I do needs to be, you know, cotton candy, but you understand my drift.
Yeah.
Maybe just understanding, maybe if within the 10, we had 7 core and 3, here's 3 optionals, you know, I don't know, just a thought.
You know, a way to think about this is to start at the other end. And this is what I did when, you know, I was leading adult education programs in churches. Like, what do we want to produce at the end? What do we want students to finish knowing? What do we want students to be prepared to do? And so we look at the student completed at the end and work backwards. What does this completed student need to get there as we're developing what courses would go into a curriculum? I just want to put one other thought out there, and this is not to be discussed today as much as just for you to think about, because we've got about 40 minutes left and we want to touch on fundraising, ask how we can support one another and spend some time praying in the time we have left. So, you know, Mark and I work for Mission North America. And we are, so MINTS is not PCA. But pretty much everybody on this call, not everybody, but almost everybody on this call has a PCA connection. And we have this partnership with Mission to North America. Well, Mark and I were on a call with the, is it associate coordinator? Is that his title, Fred Marsh's title? So the associate coordinator for M&A, as we were talking about this partnership with MINTS and Metanoia. And one of the things that Mission North America does, the primary thing that Mission North America does is plant churches. The primary thing Mission North America does is plant churches in the United States and Canada. And one of the things that Fred said that he would love to see is the ability to plant churches inside prisons. So in order to do that, we would need people that, if we were planting PCA churches inside prisons, we would need men who can meet the PCA requirements to become ordained and become church planters. And so one of the things Fred encouraged us to think about doing is organizing our courses around the PCA uniform curriculum. So PCA has a uniform curriculum. Most of you who are on here are PCA elders. You're familiar with the uniform curriculum. But if we could structure our courses so that it met the standards of the PCA uniform curriculum, we could move in a direction of having prisoner students come under care of a presbytery, become licensed to preach, and then where that was allowed, even move towards ordination and become church planters inside prisons. So that's just something to think about for the future. We don't want to just decide that today or how we might organize that, but just know that the PCA is open to that, of having men students become PCA church planters inside prisons if our courses are mirroring the PCA uniform curriculum. So Mark, you wanted to say something? Yeah.
I just want to point out that in our own presbytery, I'm in the Tennessee Valley Presbytery. Years ago, there is a man, Jeremy Ingram, who was serving a life sentence in Tennessee, who came under care of this presbytery. His pastor, Nick Wilborn, some of you might know Nick. He's a professor at Greenville Theological Seminary, but he encouraged Jeremy to not seek ordination while he was on the inside, to wait. But Jeremy did the work of a church planter, in essence. He built a congregation there at the prison he was at Morgan County Correctional. He's since been released. He was commuted. His sentence was commuted by the governor, the outgoing governor, a couple years ago. And he's under care of the presbytery again, I believe now at his church up in Oak Ridge. There have been a couple of other works around the country where churches have been tried to be planted. One in Pennsylvania, the guy's name slips my mind right now, the outside PCA guy, but also here in Nashville, in the Nashville Presbytery, there was a group of guys who were trying to plant a church in a prison there, and the presbytery agreed to the work. It was an official work of their presbytery, but then the prison transferred guys and things shut down, and so it has now ceased to be a possibility, but at the time it was. And I'd like to talk to Charles more, possibly offline or in another call at some point, to get your thoughts on that. Some states would not allow that, other states would, and I'd like to get your thoughts as a chaplain on some of those things, but we certainly don't need to take the time now, but it's something I'd like to explore more.
Yeah, we have to also consider that the courses that the PCA or the denomination of traditional Protestant churches is at the MA level. And not all of our students are at the MA, although they can get there pretty quick if they really, study in our system. So we usually start them out at the certificate and the BA level. And, but the vision of a church, take Walker, for example. They have started a church, and you guys have the guys preaching, and the preaching ministry I hear has gone very well. I think, we need to be servants of the church that exists in prison. And I think with our curriculum development, when we have that meeting, I think we can have a track for people like that. We have to be realistic. Most of our guys will not be serving in the PCA when they get out. So we have to be realistic. We want to track for those who will be able to serve when they get out, but there will also be many who will not. So what does the goal look like for them as we start, from and go backwards and look, but they can always serve in prison because that's where they are. And so we definitely want to define that as high as we possibly can and challenge them to, but again, that would come up in our curriculum development session that we will have together.
I have a question for Neil, and that is, are there any prisons now that are qualified to preach and administer the sacraments?
The chaplain usually does that. And so, but are you asking whether we have students who do, who are
Yes, that's
ministers
my
of the
question.
word and sacrament? And the answer is no, that I know of. I don't think we have any of our students are at that level.
All right, thank you.
We have students who are preaching, but we don't have any students who are serving sacraments.
Yeah.
All right, we've got 30 minutes left. Yeah, Mark.
Well, I was just going to answer that, Bill. I struggled with that when I was on the inside. Should we do the sacraments? What are those things? And I came to a very easy reconciliation that no, I shouldn't. I'm not ordained. And so I don't know of, I do know of actually, there's a small Reformed denomination called the Reformed Presbyterian, it's not the RPCNA. They have a seminary down in Florida in Lakeland. I can't think of the name. The two brothers started the seminary. Knox, is it not, or what is it? Anyway.
Whitfield
Theological Seminary.
Yeah.
That denomination that those brothers are involved with, they actually have a guy who's got a doctorate in California who's ordained, and he has been training up church planters. And then when they transfer out of R.J. Donovan Correctional Facility, they go to other prisons and they started planting churches. And so that denomination, if you go to their website, they actually have more in-prison churches than they have churches outside. They only have like 12 churches in the United States, but they have like 14 in the prison system. And so
wow.
They do administer sacraments and do things. And I could talk about that offline too, but that is something that is going on in that denomination.
Interesting. Didn't know that.
Okay, great. So we got 30 minutes left and we want to talk about fundraising and how we can support one another. So in terms of fundraising, how are you doing? Those of you on here who are raising funds. Where are you in your fundraising?
We're not doing so good. We're at 10% roundabouts, which is better than 0%. And I've been I'm reading through the God Ask again, and I'm realizing that some of my approaches have been, antiquated, I guess. And so I'm just thinking outside the box. So I've met with our home church in Colorado. I've met with both of the churches that we're associated with here in Lakeland. And they say, yeah, we'd love to partner. Here's an application. And then, it goes through the red tape of, church government. So at least those things are moving. I mean, I have those that proactive stuff going on. I've had several appointments this week and working on setting up appointments next week. So that's where I'm at with it. I think a lot of it is just trying to stay encouraged. My prayer, Janelle and I, my wife and I, last week, were feeling very discouraged. And so we just together had some dedicated prayer time and just said, Lord, we're discouraged. Could you please encourage us? And it was really awesome how the Lord answered prayer. It wasn't that somebody showed up with a suitcase of money, but it was just the idea that, Nathan and Janelle, I called you. This is my problem, not your problem, and I'll take care of you. I'll provide. And so the meetings that we had with people, even unrelated to the fundraising were really good and positive. So we're encouraged, and giving me just new perspective to go back through the book again. And I love the way that I can kind of splash cold water on my face, think outside the box, and come at it again. It's good. So anyway, that's where I'm at.
When I first started with Mints and raising funds, one of the things that was really helpful to me was I got a group of people that loved me and cared about me. It was 5 or 6, and we met periodically to pray together. But then these people also helped me with fundraising. Do you have a group, a local committee that is supporting you?
So yes, I do, and I have started that. And really it's been just people in my life that kind of represent. So like, for instance, our home church in Colorado, a good friend of mine who's been my friend since 2004. So not a spiritual leader, just a buddy that's known me. He knew the old Nathan, and he knows the today Nathan, and he's seen God work my story these, last 12 years. And then folks here from the local churches in our church family, our Sunday school teacher, for instance, that has walked with us for the last 2 years. And so those people we've surrounded ourselves with so that we can meet with regularly, and they can be our champions, and they can kind of advertise and also kind of network for us as well. And, hey, I know a guy kind of stuff. So anyway.
Great. Thanks, Nathan.
Yep.
Yeah, Mark.
I hadn't raised money before I started doing this. And so I had a full-time job in 2008 and 9 when I started becoming the executive director, and I started raising support, visiting churches, talking to individuals. And I spent time building an account before I actually launched full-time into being the ministry. And I met with this guy at a foundation one time, a Christian. This foundation sends upwards of $100 million a year to Christian ministry around the world. They're called the McClellan Foundation. They're here in Chattanooga. And this guy, Tom McCauley, when we went to him for a grant, he said to me, I want to give you a piece of advice in your support raising. And it really changed my view of this whole thing. He said, you're not going like this with your hands out. That's not what you're doing. You're not asking for a handout. What you're asking businessmen and women to do is to invest in the kingdom of God in an area that they don't have in their Christian investment portfolio. People support missionaries to go to Uganda. They support church plants here. Why not support prison ministry? Why not invest in God's kingdom in prison ministry? And when he taught me, it was like a light went on. I'm like, hey, so now I don't approach people. I don't even call them donors anymore. I either call them partners or I call them investors. And when I write a thank you note, I tell them, thank you for your investment with Metanoia Ministries. I appreciate your support, right? The other thing you always have to have before your mind, and Barry and I have talked about this, your account's going to dip low, or it's going to have zero, or it's going to, be small, but we can never forget Jehovah Jireh. Like, that's who God is. If every one of us can look back on our lives, there's never been a moment in our lives, even when we were in our deepest sin, that God didn't provide for us, pressed down, shaken up, and overflowing. And even more so, the scripture teaches us that that's who he is, that he provides for his people. I've always said, I'll know when I'm done with this ministry because the support will stop. God will show me when I'm done. But until then, there's been times where I don't know where money's coming from, and all of a sudden new people come. It's a constant relying on his grace in a way nobody else does. Pastors don't have to do that. Pastors, they know the budget's there. They know the money's coming in. Other professors, somebody's raising the money for them. But for us, we're out there constantly relying on God. So you're in constant prayer, and it's a certain tension of living that way, but to the glory of God. I've been now, this is my, 12th or 13th year, and we've never lacked a penny. God has always provided everything we have need of. And so I just say that as an encouragement to glory to God for bringing so many people that desire to invest. And as you get volunteers, they'll start investing. And so more than just their time, they will invest their talent and their treasure too.
One last thing that I just wanted to ask on behalf of Sumter Work Camp. They don't have a library. They have one NIV Bible in Spanish. And it's that because of the way that that work camp is set up, they don't have, that's it. They have math books and algebra books and science and, for people doing their GED. I saw an email come across about a theological library. I just wanted to throw my name in the hat that I'd love to be able to take a commentary. I myself bought Knowing God from R.C. Sproul and took that and gave that to the inmates today for their required reading. But that would be a great blessing to be able to even just have a little library I can let them borrow.
Yeah,
while they do class.
go ahead, Mark. You do it.
Well, do you want to break the news or you want me to? So
Yeah, go ahead.
Barry and I just had a meeting with the Ligonier staff that oversee their prison ministry. I don't know if you all know, they have 4 full-time staff that oversee that, and they are dying to give stuff away, and so to prisoners. And so I've already got the names written down. If I get your contact information, whether you're a chaplain or you're going in and doing prison ministry through MINTS or another organization, they will give you, there's a place to register. I don't know where it is, but I'm going to reach out to them when I have all the list, and they will give you $500 or more a year to spend in their bookstore for your facility, to put stuff in there, whether it's Spanish speaking stuff, whether it's English speaking stuff. They'll also, like Chaplain Charles, if you happen to want a Table Talk subscriptions, they'll send you Table Talk subscriptions. You can get the Reformation Study Bibles, all kinds of things they'll make available. So just know that that's coming very quickly. Barry and I are preparing a list.
What they said they want to do is $500 twice a year, every 6
Right.
months, $500 to spend
That's
in the
good. That's good
Ligonier
money.
bookstore
Yeah.
for your
It won't
facility.
be a check written to you, but there'll be an account that you can then buy the books and they'll ship them to you, and they'll pay for it. And so, yeah.
I'll follow up with Barry on that. Is that right? And then,
Yep.
okay, that's great. Because we're
And-
ready to go.
And
and
Nathan,
have nothing.
Nathan, we can double up on Sumter Work Camp if 500 for you and 500 for me
Well,
for
sure,
the 6 months.
sure. And I mean, Sumter, Maine, they have a nice library.
Right, the work camp is what I was, yeah.
Right.
I'm not sure
Well,
this is I was gonna say, do you guys know the Crossway thing they're doing? So basically, there's a pastor's set, a 15-volume collection of resources chosen by church leaders. It's part of this project that Crossway is giving away, and it's fully funded. And so basically, you have to register with Crossway for this set. It's a hardbound set, fully funded. And Don Ward, he's with ELI. He told me about it, and it's I think the focus is global, but I think if you can get a hold of someone and just say, hey, this is going to be the seminary library for the prison, and it's going to be a church using it, and but it's biblical theology, Christian life, Christology, conversion, counseling, discipleship, ecclesiology, eldership, evangelism. So a whole bunch of really strong, good topics that you get in a 15-volume set. And it includes the ESV Study Bible, Expositional Preaching by David Helm, Dangerous Calling by Paul David Tripp, the Gently and Lowly, a whole bunch of other stuff too. Holy moly, I didn't even realize all that. So yeah, that's just go to crossway.org. It says Global Pastors 15-volume set, totally free. But I think you have to qualify. Like, I guess you put yourself out as a missionary, just got to explain, what you're doing to them.
Great, thanks.
Very helpful.
Here's a question to Mark. How do we contact you to apply for that kind of help?
Barry, I assume, has everybody's email on here. And so if he gives me the emails, I'm going to prepare a list of the people to send to the guys at Ligonier and ask them, is Ligonier going to send you an email where you go and register, or are they going to go through us? I don't know. But we just had this conversation last week on Thursday or Friday, whatever day. It was Friday afternoon. So it's very new to all of us. And I was, since I'm answering, I was just typing a note to Jason and Nathan, but I'll say this out loud. A pastor donated a library to Metanoia. It is currently in our outer office taking up space. He was the founder of Metanoia. He and I were in prison together. He was a PCA pastor. He fell, went back to prison. He just got out, but he donated that library last year. So I talked to him last week and said, hey, do you want any of these books? Because I'm going to really try to give them away. And so he said he'll try to come up here in the next month or so and see if there's anything he wants. But I have a couple of hundred volumes. I have a brand new set of like commentaries. I've got John, what's his name? 16th century, 12
Owen.
volumes.
Owen.
Yeah, John
Owen.
Owens. I've got his stuff. I mean, there's Luther's stuff. There's all kinds of books in this library. And so I'd be glad to bring some of those down to you guys when I come down there, and I'll be down there in March for the Ligonier Conference. And so I'll put them in your hands, and you guys can take the liberty of getting them donated, however that has to happen. Now, if books have to only come through an approved vendor and be sent in that way, that becomes a different story. So maybe ahead of time, you could find out how books could be donated to the camp. Can they just be brought in? As long as obviously staff's going to go through them all page by page and make sure there's no drugs taped to them and stuff like that. But just to find that out, that'd be nice to know. I don't want to haul them all down there and then haul them all back. So
I have something I'd like to share when it comes to fundraising, just an experience to get some feedback from you guys who have been doing this for a while. In the book, The God Ask, by the way, I've read, Friendships and God Ask and many of the books that's been recommended. And in The God Ask in particular, he really says that when you sit down with a person who's a potential partner, investor in your ministry, to get them to give you a number then and there at the table, have a meal with them and get them to give you a number. And my experience now, I've met with, over 40 something people so far. And only one gentleman, before I even asked, told me how much he's going to give a month. After I was talking about what I'm doing, he says, well, I'm going to give you X amount a month, without me giving a number. But every other person who I admit I've had trepidation coming to that part of the conversation after making the presentation to say, how much do you think you can give? I mean, in the God Ask, he actually says you should have an idea before, when you meet that person, how much you think that person can give. And when I said that to one individual, would you be willing to give that? The person was taken back and said, he called me later and said, that kind of deflated me, because you expected me to give X amount of dollars and I can't give that. And it made it feel like I didn't meet your expectation, everything. And it was a difficult call that I got. And another person said, it's a bit presumptuous to do that, to put me on the spot and ask me here, how much I'm going to give. I need to think it over. And it does make me gun shy of putting them, of saying to them, how much do you think you can give? And so far, only one person came forward, and all the others said that they would think about it. They have talked to their spouse, or, just think about their finances, et cetera, et cetera. And I just want to know if you've had that experience and what you have to say. Any comment there? Am I the only one who runs into this?
I mean, I have something I would say, but I want to give you guys a chance to respond first. Jason, we haven't heard from you. How's your fundraising going? And do you sit down with people and give them an amount that you'd like them to, or you think they can give, or how do you do that?
It's going all right. I've got some more legwork that I need to do. There's a few different churches that have asked for material that I, just to confess to you guys, haven't done yet. But I've had conversations, in one in particular, I did ask, and I said, I'm looking for partners, and I read the God Ask as well. And I said, I'd wonder if you would be willing to support our ministry at somewhere between $100 to $250 a month, or, depending on your giving already, in any amount would be fine. And he said he's going to have to talk to his wife with finances, but probably $100 a month would work. In my mind, Chris, it's a really double-edged sword, and I had a very close relationship with this man. And I said, you know, why I threw it out there, that amount is, I think this is important. And I want to have a little skin in the game. Like, basically, if it's not sacrificial giving, if it's not a little bit hard, then that's basically what I challenged him to do, is to really give sacrificially. So I think it worked well because of the man I was talking to. If I didn't have as close of a relationship, it could have gone much poorer. So I'd like to hear from other people, their thoughts on that, because prior to the God Ask, I had never heard to do that. And I'd like to hear you guys' wisdom of, should I or should I not?
Mark?
Personally, I have never asked a person to give a specific amount. I ask churches based on the size of the church and what I think their budget is. I would ask, okay, especially if a church has come to me and said, hey, we'd like to support you. I'd say, okay, can you do this much? But with individuals, no one's ever asked me that. People have asked me to support them, but they've never asked for an amount. And so I've kind of never did. Again, I never took a class on it or anything. There are, once you have a donor who is giving regularly and you get to know them, you have a relationship with them, there are certain donors that I consider key donors that I can go and ask if there was a need. I might be able to say, look, would you be able to help fill this? I'll give you an example. I wanted to hire an office staff, a guy from part-time to more full-time. And he was, the agreement was he was going to help raise half his salary. I had to raise the other half. And it was $26,000 a year. So I needed to raise an additional 13. So I went to a donor and said, hey, would you be willing to give above and beyond what you give right now, $2,500 a year for the next 3 years to cover this salary? And he thought it was a good idea. And he said, yeah, I'll do that. And that's the only time I've ever done that with a dollar amount. There was a plan and a purpose for it and a time commitment for it and everything else. But otherwise, I just ask people, can you, if you will support us, would you support us at wherever the Lord leads you to, whatever your investment is in this area, would you invest, and that's it. So I have to go, guys.
Thank you, Mark, because that's how I feel, and I mean, the book of God Ask is not scripture, it's his opinion. He does have like a troubleshooting at the end, and he says he gives a story about one of his employees who's to raise funds, and the person was despondent, and he says, well, are you asking them for a certain amount? And he was like making it like that's the reason you're not getting the support, is you're not asking them for a specific amount. And I appreciate your answer, because my gut is saying this is not the way to do it, and I'm doing it more like you're saying. And another also thing I wanted to share my experience is that it is interesting how a lot of people are saying that they definitely are going to contribute in some way, and I'm having to follow up 2-3 times to find out. I'm never getting that answer. I'm still chasing after, have you made your decision yet? And by the way, guys, I think I share with most of you, I've started off on this on a very big high. So I'm approaching people in confidence because I've already got some very generous help to keep me going for a while. So I'm not coming in desperation, but it is interesting on these individuals that I've met with so far at the number of 40 and their response. It's telling me something about doing this, it's not easy. So
I'll just say the way that I have done it when I do one-on-one meetings, I don't ask them for a specific amount, but I give them a letter. And at the end of the letter, there are several different options that it would be really helpful if you could choose one of these options.
Yeah, I have that.
Could
I
you
have
do
the
$50 a month, $100 a month?
Yeah.
And so that I just give people that and then let them, pray about it and decide later.
Yeah, I have the pyramid, and it has, if I'm looking for X amount to give 50, X amount for 100 and all that stuff. It's just, I'm just sharing my experience. It's taking a while, and I'm really having to follow up, call. And at one point I'm saying, how many times do I do this, and just let it go.
Yeah, I will say in my experience has been in one-on-one meetings, 100% of the time people have said that they will support me. and probably something around 30% have actually then become financial supporters. And that was at first discouraging to me, to
Yeah.
have people tell me that they would and then not do it. And I didn't want to follow up and, with them. But I've just come to understand that people don't want to let me down. They don't want to tell me no, to my face. And that's okay. I've just learned that that's okay. And those who God has laid it on their hearts to give will do so. And so I just know I need to get through that many more people to reach the level that, that I'm hoping for. So.
Well, thank you. And by the way, I agree totally with having people that pray with you and are there supporting you, because I've had some people, again, just sharing experience. I know it sounds negative, guys, but it's the reality. But I was in one home just this week, and the person, a lot of these people are people, by the way, who I've been pastoring for 15 years from the church that I was at. And some were like, how are you, this is a lot of money you're going to need. It's expensive in the city. How are you going to do this? You're going to have a lot of people. You sure about, I'm almost like, man, I'm talking to the devil here trying to discourage me from my work. And so I'm glad I have people I can go to and talk to, and they pray for me and say, and encourage me, because you ever have that where they get involved in your personal, like, well, how are you going to do this? And what about anybody?
Yes.
Yeah.
I would say for all of us, the most important thing to have is a committee or a support group of people that are praying for you, that will encourage you, that love what you're doing, that are fans, that are supporters, and have that to keep you encouraged as you're going forward. And this really is a spiritual work. And so we need to be praying, but we need to have a group of people that are praying with us. So that's really, it's a spiritual work that we are doing with the fundraising as well. We've got 6 minutes left. And as I said at the beginning, a good meeting starts on time and ends on time. Plus, I have a 5:30 meeting that I need to drive to. So I'm going to have to wrap this up right at 5 o'clock. So we've only got a few minutes left. So let's pray for one another for the next few minutes, and we'll do this again, because I think this has been really helpful. And we have a committee. A number of you are on the committee, but we have a committee, and we'll have the next committee meeting. We'll invite others of you to join us so we can hear from you as well, and we can continue these conversations, because I think this has been really, really helpful. But let's just spend the last few minutes praying for one another, praying for the work. And then I will close in a couple of minutes. And thank you very much for your time this afternoon. But let's wrap up with praying. So let's go ahead and begin praying.
Dear Lord, we thank you so much for this time. We thank you for fellow brothers in Christ who love you and long to do your work. We thank you for the opportunity to be able to serve you in prison. We thank you for Mints to be able to teach those who want to learn the Bible, want to learn more about who you are and how you act and how we should live as Christian followers of Christ. So Lord, I pray that you would encourage us. I pray that you would raise up funds for those who are raising up funds to do this work. And I pray that you would protect us from the evil one. And you would keep us from discouragement. And I pray that we would not try to do any of this work in our own strength, that we would humbly rely upon you and glorify your name when you accomplish your good will. I pray these things in Jesus' name.
Our Heavenly Father, you are helping us with our fundraising. I say to my potential supporters, the Apostle Paul influenced a prison. I say to my potential supporters, can a Bible class of 12 men influence the prison. Would you like to invest in this ministry to answer this question? Can 12 men influence the prison? And I thank you for the privilege of being in this ministry in Jesus.
Lord, I thank you for our brothers as we continue to fulfill the mandate of visiting you in prison. And Lord, we would ask that you would encourage us day by day. We do thank you for churches and individuals who are supporting us and help us to find those, as has been said, would continue to invest and participate in the prison ministry. Lord, we just pray that you give us ideas and that we would do good follow-up and that this would be a joy. And we would just ask that that you would give us the faith to look up and to move forward in Jesus' name.
Father, I thank you just for Neil and for Greg in planting that seed in their heart of starting a seminary. Started those many years ago, and like Jesus's parable of the kingdom, starting as a mustard seed, then just growing and growing, where the birds flock and build their nest in that tree. We just celebrate what you've done with Mints to where it's grown and grown and grown, gone throughout the whole world, and just changing lives, making new ordained men in the ministry and women as well. And just pray that now these seeds that have been planted for your kingdom, for bringing the gospel in these churches, in these prisons, that would just grow as well and just overtake the prisons with your grace, as we would be faithful because of your great faithfulness to us. Just thank you for the awesome privilege of being part of your kingdom work in these prisons, to be with the best audiences, the best students who are so hungry for your word. These are humbled men that you have sent us to, and just thank you for that awesome privilege and being tied to Metanoia as well, and what you've done with Metanoia in those prisons. We've been given an awesome privilege, and just thank you for your faithfulness in calling us to do their work. We thank you in Christ's name. Amen.
Lord God, I thank you that you are a good father to your children, and that you know what we need even before we ask. And so, Lord, I would ask you to give what you know your children here need, and that you would provide for every man who's on this call, as well as everyone else that is involved with our ministry who's not here. You know what we need, Lord, and I pray that you would provide it, and that you would give us the grace to trust you as we are waiting for you to meet our needs. And we pray, Lord, that you would do so. I pray, Lord, that you would be with us as we move forward in this ministry and the many questions that we are considering in terms of curriculum and locations and delivery methods, and how to go about best serving you in prison. Lord, give us wisdom, give us a good spirit to work together as brothers. And finally, Lord, I want to pray for the chaplains and all the facilities, Lord, where we are working, that you would encourage them and build them up as they often face very difficult tasks of serving the men and women in their prisons, and doing so in the bureaucracy of a prison setting, Lord, that they not grow weary in well-doing. And again, I thank you, Lord, for these men. I thank you for all the others who work with us. And I thank you for our students, Lord, and I pray that you would encourage them as well. And Lord, we would pray all of these things in the name of Jesus Christ, our Savior. Amen.
Amen.
Thank
you,
you,
guys.
gentlemen. I will be writing up minutes as well as sending the report to you all. And we'll let you know when we schedule another meeting, and let's continue talking and dialoguing and moving forward. I want you to know that I appreciate you all very much.
Same
God
here,
bless
Barry.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Barry. See y'all.
Thank you, Barry. We appreciate you and all your work.
Yeah.
All right.
Well,
Take
thank
care.
you, Neil,
Thanks
for
for your
all your
leadership.
wisdom.